soon, babe. I'm your main man. Call me your driving wheel. I'm your main man. Call me your driving wheel. Cause when I love you, babe, girl, I know how to make you feel. Call me your king, babe. Give us all night long. Call me your king, babe. They got it so doggone strong. Yes, I can love you, babe. Baby, all night long. Call me anything you can. I'm your main man.
Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the October 6th public hearing for the City of Tampa's Barrio Latino Commission. Welcome, everyone. I'm Rich Simmons, Chair of the Commission. If you are here to present a project, you will have limited time to make your presentation, so we suggest being thorough but concise. When coming to the microphone, you will need to identify yourself and your relationship to the project. The commissioners will not ask any questions during your presentation. Your project should be presented in the following order: site plan, elevations, architectural details, wall sections. Staff will then follow up with the staff report. We will then ask for public comment. Following your presentation, the commissioners will be asking questions in the same order as the presentation. Please state and spell your name clearly if you are here to speak for or against the project, because your time will go by very quickly. Take some time now to summarize your comments, and following public comment, the applicant will have 5 minutes for rebuttal. The public hearing will then be closed. The only comments which will be allowed after the public hearing is closed will be in response to any questions from the commissioners. The commissioners will then discuss the case and make their decision based upon the City Ordinance, Chapter 27 of the City Zoning Code, the Design Guidelines, the Secretary of Interior Standards, Design Review comments, and the testimony given today at the public hearing. The BLC can only act on items that are within our specific jurisdictional responsibility. Owner agents are independently responsible to obtain any appropriate permits and/or approvals. If you haven't already done so, please silence all cell phones. We'll start with the introduction of the commissioners on my left.
Good morning. I'm Eric Schiller.
Good morning, Jose Gelatz.
Good morning, Liz Welch.
And from staff today, we have Dennis Fernandez, Ron Vila, Beverly Jusak, and from City Legal, Kate Wells. Okay. We have the minutes in our packets in front of you. Has everyone had a chance to review? Could I have a motion if there's no changes? Or if you'd like to make any changes?
I make a motion we approve the minutes as submitted.
Seconded.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Fernandez, any announcements?
Good morning, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager. Just a couple brief announcements. First of all, just to call to your attention, we are nearing the end of the calendar year, and we have provided you the 2022 public hearing calendar. If you could please note that within your personal calendars for the public hearing days, and let the staff know if there are any issues that you know of in advance, so that we just can plan accordingly. Additionally, I do have the list of the BLC administrative approvals for September, which I will enter into the record. With that, we can move on to the disclosure of conflicts of interest and ex parte communication with our legal advisor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. If I may take a moment to ask the chair and members of the commission if they have any conflicts of interest as defined by state statute with any of the items scheduled today. I see none. And then if you have received any ex parte communications, either verbal or written, that would require disclosure prior to the hearings. And I see none. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing that there are no continuations today, we're going to move on to swearing by Ms. Jusak.
So would anyone in the audience who's going to be providing testimony today, please stand and raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you'll be providing this morning is the truth and nothing but the truth? I do.
And with that, Ron will introduce the first case.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. The first two cases are associated together, so we're going to open them together, and then at the end of the presentation, then we'll separate those into two separate motions. But addressing the first case that's reflected on today's agenda is BLC 21-210/CPA 21-20. This is for the address of 1015 Lily White Court and 155 South Scott Street. This is in the Ybor City Historic District. There are some structures on that parcel. They date back to 1969, and they are non-contributing. The first case is coming forward for a recommendation to City Council for a comp plan amendment from CMU 35 to UMU 60. The current zoning is YC2, and we do have David Hay with the Planning Commission. He's going to do a brief presentation, and he will be here to answer any questions. The second case that we're going to open at the same time is reflected on your agenda under BLC 21-183/REZ 21-95. This is also for the address of 1015 Lily White Court. Once again, there are some non-contributing structures that date back to 1969. The zoning is YC2, and this request is from a rezoning recommendation from YC2 to YC9, anything within the local district of Hyde Park, and I'm going to try to illustrate that on the photo presentation that I'm going to go through in a minute, would receive a YC zoning classification. So as you move forward for the rezoning from the YC2, this will receive a YC9, and anything outside the district would be an RM24 to PD. We do have a representative from the zoning department, City of Tampa Zoning Department. Annie will be here to address any questions that come up regarding the rezoning. Also on your staff report on the rezoning portion, I know that the agent is going to address the waivers. There are 8 waivers that are associated with the PD, and they are illustrated on your staff report. Your responsibilities for both of these moving forward are to review your duties and powers with Section 2795 A2H, and it speaks to, with regards to the application for rezoning, land use changes, or comprehensive plan amendment, to review and recommend reasonable land use changes to the extent necessary to preserve the historic integrity and appearance within the local historic district. Moving to the photo presentation, if we could get the, thank you very much. Does everybody have the Sanborn on their map? Yes. Thank you. So this is from 1929. We usually start with the Sanborn map. The shaded area is the area in question. And as I go through the different frames, I think it'll be apparent to exactly where we're talking about the subject parcel. So you have 7th Avenue, you see the concentration in the commercial fabric to the north. You have Nebraska to the west. You have Adamo to the south. And you have 15th and 16th towards the east. This red line indicates our southern boundary for the local district. As I indicated in the entry, there's a portion of this request that's inside the district, and then there's a portion that continues outside the district. I tried to zoom in on the Sanborn map so you just get a closer understanding of the fabric that was there in 1929. You see the heavy casitas that were present in 1929. This is the footprint of the structures that are in the area in the early 1900s. You see the smaller fabric that's associated. This is looking from the aerial currently. Once again, you have 7th Avenue to the north. You have Nebraska to the west. Adamo is down here to the south. The roundabout as a reference point. And then you have Nucio coming up currently today as the eastern portion. Just kind of panning out a little bit. This is the local boundary district. You see Adamo, Nucio, and 7th. So you get an understanding of the subject site. This is our vicinity map. This is showing the area in question. As this project bisected by the southern boundary of the local district, the northern portion is in, the southern portion is out. There are some 1969 construction associated with this project. These will be removed. I just got a series of shots in different areas. There's the same vocabulary that's repeated over and over again here, but those will be removed. I have the aerials and the Sanborns here if these illustrations are needed as we proceed. I believe at this time Mr. Hay is going to address the board.
Good morning, Commissioners. David Hay with your Planning Commission staff. If we could share the Elmo. This presentation is regarding Tampa Comprehensive Plan Amendment 2120. We're referencing it as the Tampa Park property north. It is located within the central Tampa Planning District. It is also located within the historic Ybor neighborhood. You could see it right there. The other stars represent other plan amendments within the same cycle. Here we have an aerial of the subject site under 2120. Ron's done a good job describing the general area, North Nebraska Avenue. This dotted line here for us is the downtown periphery bonus. Anywhere south of that, there's additional flexibility with density and intensity and if you do certain projects. But then you can see the historic fabric to the northeast. It is privately initiated, it is small scale. It's approximately 5.19 acres. Currently, the land use is community mixed use 35, CMU 35. The applicant is requesting to go to that urban mixed use 60 future land use category. Here we have the future land use map. You can see all of the properties, the Tampa Park properties, everything between Nucio and Nebraska are all that pink color. That's that community mixed use 35 future land use category. To the northeast, down 7th, you do have that UMU 60, the urban mixed use 60. Directly to the east, across Nucio, is the community commercial 35 future land use category. To the west of Nebraska, you actually have some UMU 60 on the west side of Nebraska, and then the Encore development and the properties, the gasworks site to the south in this, I guess, magenta color, is the regional mixed use 100. That's the most intensive land use category outside of downtown. The applicant, if this amendment is approved, would go to that UMU 60, the same as to the northeast and to the west of Nebraska. Under the existing potential under that community mixed use 35, they can be considered up to 181 units or 452,000 square feet of residential or non-residential uses. So you could exceed the 181. They could do micro apartments, things like that, under the square footage. That would increase under the UMU 60 to a maximum of 311 units or 734,000 square feet of residential or non-residential or mixture under that. And it would allow additional density and intensity zoning districts. That concludes my presentation. I'm available if you have any questions. Thank you.
At this time, the presentation will proceed, and they'll have some more other legal team address the board.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tyler Hudson, 400 North Ashley Drive. If we could start the PowerPoint. There you go. It's an honor to be here this morning on behalf of the project team. Here with me this morning is Graham Tyrell with Kettler. This project is a joint venture of Kettler and Darrell Shaw. So KS Tampa Park Property Owner LLC is the actual applicant. Graham with Kettler is going to speak in a little bit. On the architecture side, it's been great working with Stephanie Gaines, who's going to speak brief in a little bit with CHHA. Design Collective out of Baltimore has been a consulting architect. Also on the consulting design front is Sasaki. Our civil engineer is Bowler, and Greg Roth is with us here this morning. And our arborist is Ricky Padarica with Darkmoss, who is also here and can answer any questions that you might have about tree waivers. This project that's at times been called Ybor South and now we're referring to as Gasworks fits in a really interesting area in the city. It's really between a lot of different things, but recently it's been a bit of a void from a development perspective. It's between Tampa Heights, downtown, the Channel District. It's between a lot of different things, but it hasn't really developed its own identity yet, and that's the opportunity that we're really excited to present this morning. One thing that Ron mentioned in his staff report is a desire for us to present to you an understanding of how this project starts at its greatest extent, and then narrowing down to really what it is we're talking about today. So what you see on screen in blue, that is the overall Gasworks master plan footprint. That area in blue is the subject of a planned development alternative zoning application that we're going to come back here in December to talk to you about. The project that we're in, the red line, is something you're going to see repeatedly throughout this presentation, is the historic district boundary, because both the project we're talking about just this morning, as well as the broader Gasworks project, does straddle that line. We're talking today really only about that yellow crosshatched line area, what we're referring to as phase one, which is the component of this project that we're most eager to get started about, and that we're going to discuss in a great amount of detail in the next 60 minutes, hopefully a little less. Before diving into the specifics, I want to stress a couple things. The first is that this project is divided between the historic district and not in the historic district. We don't want to hide the part that's not in the historic district, so I think in the interest of convenience and understanding and obviously transparency, we're going to present this entire project, but so you know, portions are not in the historic district. This is not a design hearing. We're not bringing material samples, anything like that. We're probably going to come back in early 2022, hopefully maybe even as early as January, assuming that Tampa City Council approves this PD and this comprehensive plan amendment on December 9th of this year. That's when we're scheduled. As I alluded to earlier, we're going to come back here for the same type of hearing, not about design, but about a rezoning, about a comp plan amendment, and also about a right-of-way vacating for that larger, fullest extent blue area that we talked about earlier. But we're not going to talk about that full area today. We're just going to talk about that yellow crosshatched area I showed you earlier. So really getting down to the details, we're here today, as Ron alluded to and David did as well, for two things. We're asking for your recommendation of approval for a comprehensive plan map amendment for a single incremental increase in density under the future land use element of the Tampa Comprehensive Plan. We are also asking for your recommendation of approval for a rezoning of this entire assemblage from YC2 RM24 to YC9 PD, which in English is going from a standard residential multifamily zoning district to a site plan controlled zoning district. I'm going to talk a little bit about the site plan features, as will Stephanie, and Greg and Ricky can expand further if you all have questions. I'm going to present the waivers, the basics of what we're asking for. Then Graham Tyrell with Kettler is going to talk a little bit about why Kettler likes this project, why we're so excited about it. And finally, Stephanie's going to talk about some of the design considerations that motivated the general footprint, the massing, things like that, that are kind of germane to today's discussion. I'm going to first cover the map amendment, and I'm going to really breeze through this because David, I think, did a great job summarizing it. We're only talking about the green parcels there. UMU 60 is what we're asking for. This was part of a larger application for UMU 60 in the historic district, RMU 100 to the south. For a lot of reasons I don't need to go into, we've actually broken those applications into two, so we're really only asking for the UMU 60, I believe, within the historic district. There is precedent for that. As David alluded to, there's a lot of purpley red colors here, but to the northeast of the site, really along the 7th Avenue corridor, is UMU 60. West of Nebraska, in the Encore area, is UMU 60. To the southwest and the southeast, you've got RMU 100, which you recall the last time we were here. It was actually to accomplish some of those comprehensive plan map amendments. Between Nebraska and Nucio, the Tampa Park Apartments complex, having been around since the late 60s, really it didn't change much. It was a bit of an island. And so what this effort is aimed at is, I think, really right-sizing the density to be appropriate for this project's location, really at the very edge of the central business district, and certainly in portions of Ybor City where there's ample precedent for a little bit higher density. And the reason we didn't ask for RMU 100 in the historic district is due to, obviously, the height sensitivity that the Ybor City design standards and you all as a board enforce. So that was a conscious decision to not completely max out here. One thing to note that in both CMU 35 and UMU 60, if you are in the historic district, you actually get a little bit of a step up. You go from 1.0 to 2.0 in CMU 35. In UMU 60, you go from a base of 2.5 to 3.25. And one consideration here is you don't have to use all of the density that you're getting. Because this will be eventually part of a larger project, there is an ability to blend density around. So for example, if we want to push some density that we may have on this site further away from the historic district boundary, this is really what affords us the opportunity to do that, to be respectful of those transition zones. We believe there is support in the comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission has not yet reviewed this, so I can't come in and say that they have a consistency finding. We feel very confident that staff will recommend consistency, and we'll get that from the Planning Commission as well. The comp plan actually alludes to this area called South Ybor City that this general project kind of falls into as this transitional zone. And so it is within the Central Park Urban Village along with Encore. So we believe this incremental step up in density is appropriate in light of certainly the tremendous growth that Tampa's seeing writ large, but especially based on the interest to live in Ybor City. That's where people want to live. So unless there's any comp plan amendment questions, I'm going to move on to the PD. Can I have that? Thanks. So very basics on the PD. The site is a little bit under 8 acres. We're proposing just under a 2.0 FAR, 724 multifamily units paired with about 20,000 square feet of commercial. That would be served by 941 parking spaces. This is partially in the historic district, partially not. 2 buildings are in the historic district, and the third southern building is partially in the historic district. So here's the list of waivers that I'm going to go to in hopefully an acceptable level of detail. But at the outset, I kind of want to note something. Ybor City was founded, I think, in 1885. And 2 years later, it's annexed into the city of Tampa. It's 40, 50 years later that the U.S. Supreme Court in Euclid v. Ambler decides that local governments even have the power to zone. Ybor City existed prior to zoning, and some of the cities and the places that I think we look to the most for inspiration existed prior to zoning. People, believe it or not, lived together prior to zoning and created built environments prior to zoning. It wasn't until I think 1984 that the city adopted Chapter 43A, which is the predecessor to the current Chapter 27 of the Land Development Code. And to honor the Ybor City pattern of development, which Stephanie is going to talk about in much greater detail, there arise inconsistencies with some of the technical requirements of the Land Development Code. And so through the PD process, we're able to get waivers for those. You all are able to grant variances And you're asked to do that certainly frequently in connection with the certificate of appropriateness process. By getting these waivers, when we come back for the certificate of appropriateness, we won't have to ask for any variances because these deviations from code will have been hopefully approved by City Council through the PD. There are 8 waivers. They do sort of cluster in themes, and so I'm going to go through those from a sort of thematic basis, but I will touch on each waiver and give you a sense of why we're asking for them. And perhaps at the end, if you have any specific questions, either I'll handle that or I'll bring in a subject matter expert who can maybe shed a little bit more light on them. First is parking. This is a fairly common reduction request in the city of Tampa. We have a parking code that is different in the Ybor City Historic District and in the city of Tampa. If we were in the historic district entirely, we would have a parking space requirement of 784, but instead it's 992 due to the significantly increased per unit and the guest space requirement of the conventional City of Tampa parking requirements for the southern building, the southernmost building that we're seeking approval for. Certainly in Ybor, there's a pattern of reduced parking requirements. Again, YC 1 and 3, there is no off-street parking requirement, and the overall parking requirements are less. We do have a bit of a narrow site, just the way that there's the school and some other property that we don't own to the west. On the east, you have Nucio Parkway, but actually between our site and Nucio Parkway, there's a 30-foot wide strip of city property that's technically a dedicated park. It hasn't certainly been really used as a park, but that really limits our footprint in what we can do. And parking spaces are very expensive in terms of cost, but really more importantly, the opportunity cost of parking spaces in terms of how it limits fully adhering to some of the design standards we want to do is a serious problem. And so this is a modest reduction, we think, of 5%. Certainly it's common to ask for a bit more than that, but we believe this is justified based on what we are gaining in terms of how to promote the Ybor City design standards that Stephanie's going to talk a little bit about. Second category is loading. The City of Tampa has a hungry requirement for loading spaces, in that our project, based on the square footage, would require a total of 5 loading spaces, and we are only providing 3. For context, in the West Shore Overlay District, which is a very high density, a lot of RMU 100, multifamily and office buildings, that West Shore Overlay District has a maximum requirement of 1 loading space. 5 loading spaces is a significant amount of real estate, and for a tight site, it's really hard to maneuver in and around 1 loading space, much less 5. So you'll see we actually have 2 waivers here. We're asking to go from 5 down to 3, and we're also asking for loading to occur in more than 1 continuous maneuver, so a 3-point turn or something like that. As you can imagine, really in any city, that's pretty common. There's only so much. It's not like at the fairgrounds, at the Freight Masters Truck Training School, where there's just acres and acres of parking to maneuver around. This is a tight site. That waiver is quite common. Not that its popularity or frequency is alone a justification, but again, the tightness of the site. If we have 5 loading berths and we allowed a truck to maneuver into them in 1 continuous maneuver, I don't think anyone would believe the site and the project resembles something Ybor City would want. So we believe that this is justified also based on Kettler, the developer's extensive multifamily experience, understanding when people move in and move out. This isn't student housing when everyone moves in and moves out on 1 day. And so we're very confident that the 3 loading spaces will adequately serve the development. On trees, we have sort of a cluster of 3 waivers. The first 2 are probably the most important. We have to remove 3 non-hazardous grand trees. And the reason for that is because this site, again, has been unchanged for over 50 years. And there has been a pattern of tree growth based on that development footprint that's just not the same as our development footprint. And we have done everything we can to avoid this. The reason for these 3 specific trees is the first tree that we're not able to keep is because we're proposing an extension of 4th Avenue west across Nucio to help reconnect the street grid. It's right in the middle of where that would go. The other 2 non-hazardous grand trees that we seek the removal of are really right in the middle of building footprints that you simply can't build around them. They're just really right smack dab in the middle, and Ricky can chat a little bit about that if you have specific questions. we can also talk about, to the extent you have questions on the amount of new tree growth that we're promoting, because keeping the urban canopy, shade trees, things like that, that's obviously something that's an important part of just the walkable social fabric of Ybor that we do want to maintain. But these first two waivers are critical because, just as I said, it's developed for 50 years in a certain configuration that's just not 100% compatible with the footprint of the buildings that we're proposing. That third waiver, it's possible that waiver might not be needed if we are unable. That waiver would be needed if we're unable to plant sufficient replacement trees on site. We're going to do everything we can to do that, to get everything on site. But in the interest of transparency, I want you all to understand that that is a waiver that we might need to take to City Council and to permit if we're not able to plant sufficient trees on site through some of the courtyard features that we're proposing. Traffic. This is a waiver that is absolutely necessary because the waiver is to allow commercial traffic onto a local street. That's the only choice we have. Right now, Scott Street is really the only vehicular ingress-egress really for the project as it's currently designed. I would note that one thing that we were talking to the city about, and we have a note on our PD, is that we are proposing some street grid realignments. That's an incredibly important thing to Darrell and to Kettler. And so we're talking about reconnecting 4th Avenue across Niceo, as well as Scott Street. Now remember I mentioned that 30-foot wide city strip that's just to the west of Niceo. Getting through that will require a city easement and process that we're going to work with the city on after hopefully we get approval, but before permitting. If we're able to secure that, then this waiver would go away because Niceo is not a local street, but this waiver is an absolute necessity simply because there are no other streets. We're pretty hemmed in here based on the way the street pattern was developed with the Maryland Avenue replat. Finally, this waiver, like the tree trust fund waiver, we're still working with city staff on whether or not this is actually going to be necessary. As you all know, when you have use-to-use buffers, so commercial next to multifamily, there are certain buffering requirements. One requirement that can arise in certain circumstances is a 6-foot masonry wall. We don't want that wall. We believe it's inconsistent with the Ybor City Design Standards, which promote street interaction. We don't think it actually applies because the property to the north, from a zoning perspective, really still is multifamily, even though it's not occupied. So we're going to continue working with the city to finally and conclusively determine whether that waiver is available. But again, in the interest of transparency, I want you to understand this is something that we may need to ask for. And the reason we don't want to build the 6-foot masonry wall is, again, we think it really would take away from the street interaction that the Ybor Design Standards promote. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Graham Tyrell, Senior Vice President of Development with Kettler, who's going to chat a little bit about how he sees the project. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Graham Tyrrell. I'm Senior Vice President with Kettler, as Tyler mentioned. I am the developer for the project, working in a joint venture with Darrell Shaw. Very excited to be working on this project. And as Tyler alluded to, what we're looking at today is really part of a much larger whole in terms of the gasworks redevelopment, which is really sort of trying to bring back to this part of South Ybor, north of Channel District, and sort of east of Encore, and start to knit together some of these neighborhoods. And so we put this graphic up on the screen because we think this sort of explains very well. And I'm sure you guys are very familiar with this, that there is this sort of missing middle, if you will, in the neighborhood.
Images on our monitors. They're showing up on the over. Thank you.
Okay. So part of what we're really interested in with this project, we're so excited about, is that it really is going to give us an opportunity, we think, to reconnect. And part of that is really establishing the street grid. So thanks, Stephanie. So as we're looking particularly at what we refer to as the W1 and W2 parcels, that is the PD application that we're here for today, a big part of that is reintroducing the streets. In this case, it's 4th and 5th Avenue. And that's really part of a bigger vision here that we have for really creating a much more urban, walkable, and desirable footprint really for this area. Obviously, the Tampa Park Apartments and sort of the area west of Nucia Parkway in particular was part of the urban renewal process. It wasn't really thought of at that time with pedestrians really in mind. It was really thought of in an auto environment. Nucia Parkway was really set up to get traffic in and out of downtown. So one of the things we really want to do is bring the Tampa Park site and reconnect it to the other side that we are also interested in developing as part of the bigger Gasworks neighborhood. So that will include...
Mr. Chairman, if I hate to interrupt, but I just want to say something for the record. What is noticed today for this commission's action is the comprehensive plan and the rezoning for just the W1 and W2 parcels. And I didn't want to interrupt, but there continues to be references to the larger project. That is not before you for consideration. It should not influence your decision. And I would submit to the applicant and the team that it's outside the boundaries of the presentation today, because again, it's not noticed for discussion today. So I would ask that the presentation be limited to what is actually on the commission's agenda.
Okay. And really, this was really just, mostly just to provide some context. So what you're looking at has some sort of balance to it, but I think at that point I'll just hand over to Stephanie, and she can actually get into the details of what we're really talking about, the W1, W2 sites. Thank you.
Good morning, Stephanie Gaines, Kurtz Gaines Hall Jones Architects. We are the architects working with Kettler on the W1 parcel, and today my job is to talk about that, and as well as the north portion of the W2 parcel, which is also within the district. We're really pleased to be part of this group, this big group working on this. And our role as architects is to understand the historic development of the area that we're working with, as well as studying zoning and studying historic references, so that this project benefits the district and preserves the integrity of the historic district. So when working with a project like this and with those factors, we have three major areas that we study. Historic patterns, development patterns that have occurred on the property, as well as changes that have occurred over time. Zoning and land use, of course, comes into play, and the historic models of historic references for large projects of these sizes is also part of the process. Starting with some of these are old and dark, but starting with this timeline photographs, we try to tell the story of what has occurred over time. So originally, and actually I think Ron had a drawing that, or Dennis, that had a drawing that showed the clustering of development originally. So originally this area was simply a part of Ybor City. There was no delineation, no divide, regular north, south, east, west street grid was strong in the area, and it was filled with small cigar workers' residences with those commercial uses that supported that neighborhood, as well as a few small cigar factories and other businesses. Well, I'll tell you, this was not a wealthy area. It was overcrowded, and it was underserved by the city utilities, city infrastructure. So in the 60s, under the guise of urban renewal, 95% of the structures in the area were taken out, and the land was left barren until a further destruction of the historic character was realized when curved roads and large curved roads were put in place of the strong grid, rectilinear grid, and large parcels were developed. And Nick Nucio was 11th Avenue and it was turned into Nick Nucio as a long, sorry, my pencil's shaking there, but as a long connector road to Casson, Nebraska, and downtown, and up now it even connects to Interstate 4 access. But this became a real divide for this property, and where the area used to be an integral part of Ybor really became separated. Looking in closely at the character of the area, it was typical Ybor. There were brick streets, some dirt streets, small clusters of small housing along the streets, filled in with a few, commercial shops, probably with apartments above, and then the occasional freestanding building like this social club, the Martí Marceo, which unfortunately during the demolition of all the other structures, this one was also taken out. And as I understand it, it's the only social club that was torn down on purpose. Fires destroyed the original wood ones. They were built back with masonry, but this is the only one that was demolished. Looking at the current character, first of all, you cannot deny that Nick Nucio develops or defines the character of the area. It's a large 4-lane divided highway, basically, that encourages people to ride through the district, not to stop and participate. There's so much pavement here that even though it's 4 lanes, there was enough to put a full extra lane just recently of bike paths, which is nice for that fact, but just to accentuate how much paving is there. So that's planned, I believe, on both sides of the property. There's no street grid, no anything that resembled Ybor in this area. It looks more like a suburban kind of a setting where large parcels are created to create large projects. The buildings don't relate to the street. They're set far aside from the street. They're scattered in kind of a haphazard way, and between the buildings there's a lot of paving. Okay, that second thing that we looked at is zoning. Now we took the zoning map we're studying all those things, scale and massing and all of those things. And so we created a 3-dimensional zoning map just to understand the height, the goals of zoning as far as height goes. So there's lots of different zones here, and they're divided by these lines. But the point of this drawing is to show the height limits. So everything that here is in yellow has a height limit of 45 feet. The darker tan color has a height limit of 60 feet. And the looks kind of white on this projection. Those areas that are just here and here illustrate zones that have a 35-foot height limit, which the W1 portion of our building falls within. And this is just collecting information and looking at the heights, in the YC2, which is what the W1 property is zoned in, is the only one that's 35 feet. And the other thing is that the Y2 35, I'm mixing my verbs here. YC2 is the only district that is really encourages single-family building, which seems very, very peculiar for the setting that it's in now. Maybe originally it was, or maybe somebody intended to bring back what it was historically, but it just doesn't make sense right now. Okay, and the final thing that we studied is historic references. So we were able to find 3 large historic campuses, if you will, projects that have been enlarged over time and to fill at least a block, if not more. And those are the Cuesta Rey factory north of the interstate, the Ybor Manrera or Ybor Square or whatever we call it these days, just north of the project, and the Florida Brewery property, which is just immediately adjacent to our property. So here's a historic and new photo of the Cuesta Rey. And, you know, I'm sure that we've all studied the cigar factory building forms. They were all long and narrow, 3, 4, and 5 stories. This one probably started with just that building. And then this addition in the front for offices and water tower were added, and in the back could have been warehouse and stimmery uses. And in adding these appendages, areas were left out to maintain the slender main building and to create courtyards, if you will. A lot of these, at least the very nice cigar factories, had big gardens for employees to enjoy. And this is very lushly planted, which, you know, we don't see much of in Ybor. And so that's how it happened, that the appendages were not just widen the building or fill out to the site, but add these cuts in the elevator. It also created a way of breaking down the massing of the square footage that was on the property. And this is a current photo, or a recent photo, where a non-historic addition was added, and still maintaining those courtyard feelings, spaces. And I'm sure that these are probably used for loading and unloading now. No pretty gardens.
Excuse me for interrupting, but you have an hour for your presentation. You're probably about 15, 20 minutes left.
Wow, okay.
So, I don't know if you want to.
Okay,
Thanks.
gotcha. So let me show you this one quickly, which is just the Ybor Manrera, and really I'll just point to the Sanborn map. This is a 3D photo, and again, the cigar factory was first, then the stimmery, offices here, warehouses here, but it created these spaces that broke down the scale and provided gathering spaces, landscape spaces. And then there's the Florida Brewery, which was a complex that involved more than just one block. But anyway, it started with the smaller structure. It was the tallest part. That was the original part. And then over time, additions were added, and even the office was across the street. And so we still have those open areas. So we took all that information and we applied it to our site. And the result was coming up with these long and narrow building forms with appendages, both for the north and south building and along the face of W2, where we have step backs and cutouts to break down the massing and to provide those outdoor spaces. This is just a close-up of the area. Everybody's talked about the streets cutting through. That's just a major idea in this design. And we've minimized setbacks. We've stepped back the building where there's unusual situations like this angled street. And we've created courtyards. And in fact, 3 of these areas surround the existing grand oaks that we're saving. And on this Scott Street, which is quieter, there's walkout units. This results in a step-up height pattern, which we think is appropriate. Looking at it from from Nick Nucio, an aerial massing diagram, and the elevations, which show a gentle curve from the lowest part of the site to the highest part, which this red line again is the historic district. So we're 3 and 4 stories here, 4 and 5 in this building, and then 4 or 5 stepping up to 6 outside of the district. And we've just got these 4 massing renderings to show you. You know, it's hard for us to talk about this project without getting into the architecture, and then it's hard to show you a massing plan without adding architecture because it's all part of it. But we tried to stay in our lane and not get called out on the by the attorneys, but we did want to show you the character and give you some confidence that this process we're getting ready to go through only starts here. You know, we'll be before you several times for a certificate of appropriateness where all the details, you know, will be worked out. Okay, that's it. You want to, so I think we're ready for questions. Yep.
Do you want to close your presentation, or I thought we were going to hear from the landscape? Okay. Mr. Vila, would you like to follow up with the staff report?
Mr. Chair, I'll be handling that for the staff. I think this morning's discussion is going to begin with the comprehensive plan amendment request. So I'll focus this current staff report on that particular request. Staff did feel that the request is consistent with the objectives delineated within the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances with Section 27-95A2H. I just want to review that with you one more time. That's going to be a reoccurring code section in your consideration this morning. That does state, with regards to applications for rezoning, changes to land use classification, or comprehensive plan amendments, your duty is to review and recommend reasonable land use changes to the extent necessary to preserve the historical integrity and appearance of the locally designated, in this case, district, and that it be in accordance with the applicable design guidelines. We had a list of conditions that we asked for supplemental information. I believe that between the different presenters this morning, they did provide information on all of those different areas. So with that, staff has no further comments and does indicate that it is consistent with the code section that I just reviewed. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to do the staff report for the second part of this case now, or do you just want to handle this one, take this one all the way through?
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that the commission focus on the comprehensive plan amendment first. We allowed the applicant to present both so that you could understand everything before you.
Correct.
But for purposes of action, I would recommend that you focus on the proposed plan amendment, take action on that, and then take up the rezoning.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, is anyone here from the public that would like to comment on this case? Please step forward.
Mr. Chair, I did want to let you know that you do have some letters in your packets that were provided to the staff and provided to you, and will be entered into the record as well.
Perfect, yes, I've read them. Thank you. Okay, so we can, the commissioners will now ask questions of the applicant. We'll start with Ms. Welch on my right.
Right now, I don't have any questions.
Thank you for a very comprehensive presentation. I'm not sure who to direct these questions to. Perhaps, I know one maybe to our city representative here in terms of the zoning, but I'm curious, part of what's before us is a parking reduction, which I can understand.
We're not doing that yet. We're just gonna focus on the recommendation of City Council to change the future land use, the comp plan amendment from CMU to UMU 35.
But
and then,
that also includes all the
no, variances are in the rezoning.
Oh, okay, my apologies then.
They combine their they combined their presentations into one, but now we just clarified,
Yeah.
we're just gonna stick with BLC 21-210, CPA 21-20 at this point in time. So it's a comp plan amendment recommendation to City Council at this point.
Okay,
And if I may, just to clarify the record, the proposed plan amendment is from CMU 35 to UMU 60. So at this point, you're looking at the potential for development that is allowed under UMU 60 and the appropriateness at this location. And that really would be focusing on the presentation that David Hay made, as well as that portion of the applicant's presentation that addressed the proposed plan amendment. So you're really looking at the current entitlements that you have under CMU 35, what the maximum entitlements could be under UMU 60, and the appropriateness of that proposed plan amendment at this location as it relates to the historic district.
but none of the specifics they presented,
That's like part two of your.
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Then I have no questions.
And I did place the proposed future land use map on the Wolf for you to reference.
Mr. Schiller?
No, I have no questions under the same circumstance.
So basically, you know, they're with the change of use, right, from CMU 35 to UMU 60, they're gonna gain up to 311 units, 734,748 square feet, and go up to a FAR of 3.25, is what that new comp plan amendment allows them to do with the future land use from the existing, which was significantly lower. I forget the numbers offhand, but gives them significantly more opportunity.
And what it gives them is only in this dotted area on the
Yes.
map, right?
Yes. Okay, I have no questions for the applicant either. You have a couple minutes to summarize anything with that you would like for your presentation as related to this comp plan amendment. Would you like to summarize anything? Then we're gonna close the public hearing.
In the interest of time, we don't have any further comments on the comp plan amendment. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and close the public hearing. We're gonna have some discussion among ourselves, and then we'll entertain a motion.
No, I have no problem.
I think what the applicant is presenting is certainly reasonable, given the land use changes and how it fits into the historic guidelines for the district. So I could fully support it.
I don't have anything.
Yeah, I think this is a reasonable application here to gain additional density on the site. It's on the outskirts of the district, half the site boundaries, the local district, half of it's more of an urban. But I think that comp plan amendment is certainly appropriate for that area. And as we saw, there's some future development that will support additional density in that area. I think we've made it clear to the applicant before that, anything that touches that historic boundary is going to be looked upon, and we'll see that as moving forward with the CAs that are going to come before us. But I think this is an appropriate use for that parcel. I'd like to entertain a motion for recommendation to City Council based on what we've got in front of us. Other page, yeah.
Which one are we doing?
Second from the bottom.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, second from the bottom? I'll let.
Be this one, it's a recommendation
to City Council, that's what I thought.
I can't read that far.
Don't be messing me up, you know I do the wrong thing here. Okay, I'd like to make a recommendation to City Council that we move to recommend City Council approve BLC 21-210, CPA 21-20 for the property located at 1015, am I on the right one?
Yes.
Hold on a minute. Okay, I'm sorry, I had to make sure. 1015 Lily White Court and 1555 South Scott Street for the proposed rezoning from CMU 35 to UMU 60 with the and I'm not listing any conditions.
Yeah.
So there are no conditions.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
I'd like
I
to
guess-
clarify that it's not a rezoning, it's a comprehensive plan amendment from CMU.
Okay, let's modify that that's a comprehensive plan amendment from CMU-35 to UMU-60. Period.
Okay, and I second the motion, also stating for the public record that because it was consistent with 27-95A2H.
Thank you.
Is that acceptable?
Yes, that's
Okay.
acceptable.
Is there a second?
Oh,
Was it- that was the second.
I was
the
the second
second,
with a
okay.
condition.
All right, all in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, so now we'll move on to BLC 21-183, rezoning RAZ 21-95. Okay, and we'll go back to Mr. Fernandez for the staff report, please.
Good morning once again, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager. Dealing with the request, I do want to make one slight change on your staff report under the top block where it says request from the YC2 RM24 to PD. That should also include YC9. It is on the agenda, just did not make it onto the staff report. So the YC9 is equivalent to a planned development classification within the YC zoning district.
Can we also, while you're on that topic, Mr. Fernandez, if you don't mind, waiver number 2, the applicant said that there's 3 non-hazardous grand trees, but the application says 4. Do we want to, if you're going to make a change to?
I believe we extracted that information from the PD plan. That may have been a change. Is it 3 now?
Good morning, Tyler Hudson, 400 Ashley Drive. When you initially submit, you propose waivers that you think are expected, and then there's a DRC, which is when all the different city departments kind of throw at you what their concerns are, and then you resubmit. So in connection with the resubmittal, it turns out there's only 3 non-hazardous grand trees being removed, and Ricky Paterica can shed some light on that. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. With that, the staff does find that the request is consistent. We have a number of conditions. Of course, that is all subsequent to your determination on the appropriateness of the waivers that are being requested, and I think the applicant gave a thorough presentation with regards to those. One of the issues that we wanted was thorough presentation so that the commission could understand the scope of what the current entitlements are and what the proposed entitlements are. I think that was accomplished through the various presenters this morning. As always, it's a very challenging phase of a project when you're looking at it such a preliminary state with sort of visioning exhibits to try to understand how that might play into the actual certificate of appropriateness process, which would come in the event that the request is approved by City Council. So we do have one of our notes that we would ask be added to the site plan prior to City Council hearing is to authorize the Barrio Latino Commission the ability to adjust setbacks on all elevations for a distance of up to 10 feet to enable development of building elements that characterize the Ybor City Historic District and that will facilitate the architecture review process. That is an approach that we've utilized on site plan specific zoning plans in the past that gives the board some authority to perhaps adjust a line or to step a line back to break up massing or to add an architectural detail. So with that one caveat, the staff does feel that the request is consistent with Chapter 27, Section 295, A2H. Thank you.
I have a question for.
Can you hold on to?
Sure. Well, for Dennis, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just, in terms of the note that you're asking about the 10-foot setback, this will perhaps clarify another question I have for me, because one of the things that this project is trying to create is take a non-historic city grid, tie it back into perhaps some more street alignments that are historic. But ultimately, the shapes of the property are not true squares, which you normally see within the district. So one of my concerns is one of the overriding architectural features of the district are, for the most part, we have buildings that are parallel to those streets. This is more of a design review thing, but it seems like what's maybe proposed for this site doesn't necessarily follow that kind of pattern that we see within the historic district. And that's a design review thing, I realize that. But does your note here about having us oversee the 10-foot distance, will that give us the jurisdiction to address those issues if they become concerns?
I believe, 10 foot was, I thought, a reasonable number for that dimension. And that doesn't necessarily mean an increase in the 10-foot setback. It could be a decrease in the 10-foot setback. So, that gives you some flexibility as a perimeter moving around the building to step in and step out or to align. I think particularly on the east side of the project along Nucio, where it's sort of a curvilinear roadway, those type of rectilinear forms are going to be a little difficult to achieve. But this type of note, if you didn't have this sort of authority, it would be specific to the plan that's being proposed today, and you could not adjust it at all. So I think this gives you a little bit of reassurance that you're going to have some effect on the final footprint when it comes back to you during the CA process.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is anyone here from the public wishing to comment on this case? Please step forward. Seeing none, we're going to
Just
go ahead
wanted to, the letters that I had submitted for the comp plan amendment are also applicable to the rezoning request.
Agreed. Okay, well, you can have the commissioners ask some questions of the applicant. Mr. Schiller?
Okay, so we're now in the southern parcel, is that correct?
No. It's both parcels. It's both parcels.
I'm lost.
Now now the property that we see in the W1, W2, they're now, since they've got the comp plan amendment, now we're looking at a recommendation to rezone, and maybe this is a question for staff, rezone from YC2 RM-24 to PD and YC9, and I'm not sure if there needs to be two separate motions made there, YC2 going to YC9 and RM-24 to PD, or just group them together.
Mr. Chairman, Kate Wells for the record. I would recommend that you group them together because you're looking at the site holistically, and they really didn't distinguish between that portion, which is proposed to be YC9, and that portion which would be PD, although it might be based on the historic for the Ybor City. But it's one application before you, so the recommendation would be for those proposed rezoning districts holistically.
Yeah. So we're going to look.
So again, this is a recommendation to City Council, as with the prior one, but here you're looking at the proposed rezoning, the location of the buildings, the waivers that were requested, the recommended or the requested height. That is what this commission is now considering, is that rezoning that will be considered by City Council next.
All right, thank you.
Can we have a discussion?
We're going to ask questions of the applicant right now, and then we can discuss them on ourselves.
Okay, so if, this is to the applicant, so you're asking for a PD for the northern and the southern parcel, that's in and that's out of the district, is that correct?
Yes, so we're asking for a site plan controlled zoning district that encompasses all of the parcels, but a site plan controlled zoning district has two different names. Outside the historic district, it's called a planned development PD, and inside the historic district, it's called YC9. So YC9 is essentially Ybor for PD plan development. So we're proposing a single zoning district that nonetheless has two different identifications based on whether it's inside or outside the historic district.
Okay. I think if you look at the two sites, the northern one's in the local historic
That's
district,
right.
the other one's outside, but they're looking at it as one whole, so there's two different motions.
So,
Two different properties, one motion.
are there different administrative functions to a PD versus a YC9? Or do they share all the same restrictions and allowances?
They are identical except for the identification of the district. Well, a YC9 is a PD in every respect except that it's geographically located in the Ybor City Historic District.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question too for the applicant. This is regarding your request for us to consider a modification of the required parking. First, I'd like to state that I think that seems reasonable given the density we're trying to encourage within not only the historic district, but right outside and its connection to the CDV, but also the fact that it's important, and I think it's a city initiative to try to reduce automotive traffic. But that said, I'm just curious, and I think our city representative left, but I'm curious, what kind of restraints or what kind of requirements are on a project of this size in terms of requiring alternative forms of parking, such as electric scooters, motorcycles, bicycles, within the property, like for tenants, and then also on the exterior for people who may be visiting and or using the commercial spaces?
Sure, that's a great question. So let me first address how the code views it, and then I'll ask Graham to address how the developer views it. So the code, recall that there are different parking requirements inside the Ybor City Historic District and outside, both in terms of ratio, X spaces per Y units, but also the requirement for guest spaces. Outside the Ybor City Historic District, multifamily units, each unit requires 0.25, a quarter of a space for guests. And that can really drive up parking requirements in a larger project. So the treatment is different. In terms of the substitution, the way the code reads, and I believe Annie's here and can weigh in as well, but in our experience, the ability to offset vehicular parking spaces with non-vehicular bays or spaces is really limited in the case of interim special events. There are circumstances in which applicants will request an administrative design exception to reduce their parking requirement, and they may use as justification bike spaces or scooter spaces, things like that are provided. But in the general Tampa code and in Ybor, we don't believe that there is a specific offset. Seminole Heights, for example, does have one. So that's why it's not part of our justification because the code doesn't recognize that explicitly. But I would ask that Graham maybe address how the developer views the need for the kind of multimodal, non-vehicular parking in the area. I would note too, this isn't part of the technical justification. We are providing, I believe, 27 on-street parking spaces in those new drive aisles that are created. But Graham, if you could talk a little bit about bike scooter.
And also the other part of that question too would be, you did say that there are some guest spots, but I'm just curious if those guest spots are only for authorized guests visiting residential or perhaps assigned to the commercial. Are they available to the general public if you're coming here to patronize part of the commercial?
Yeah, that's a great question for Graham.
Yeah, again, Graham Terrell with Kettler. What we find in our apartment buildings is that, number one, the City of Tampa code currently, as Tyler alluded to, requires a lot more parking than we see in terms of market demand. So that's sort of generally where we start from. In terms of offering other alternative things, we do definitely have within our building bike storage areas, and we sort of encourage the people to use those. We make them look very attractive, so they're not just like chain link, parts of the garage. And then we also offer up maintenance areas as part of that bike storage as well, so that really kind of encourages people to use their bike on a more frequent basis. And then, as I mentioned earlier, a big part of our design here really is to think about the connection back to the other side of Nucio Parkway? How do you get to the streetcar, for example? So we're definitely thinking about those things in terms of sidewalk connections as well as, bike trails and other things. We do have on-street parking spaces, and we think those will work really well, for example, for people coming to the building for leasing purposes, when they just want to come and stop and go in for, a tour of the building. We are going to have some parking in the garage that is before the gate. So a large part of the parking will be secured for residents, but there will be a lot of parking spaces that are also available just for visitors. And in terms of how we manage that, in terms of whether it's also parking for retail users, we'll kind of figure that out nearer the time. We do have a small amount of retail space within both buildings, so there will likely be people coming for the retail as well. But yeah, no, we definitely are thinking about it. I think also on the site plan, you'll see there are areas already designated for outdoor bike parking, so that is part of the plan as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a couple more questions. And I don't know who to address this to, but I noticed in some of the site photographs, there would appear to be, what appear to me to be historic bricks crosswalks and also historic brick aprons. And I'm just want some kind of clarification if those are going to be repurposed or reincorporated or maintained.
I'll ask Stephanie to address that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, Gregory Roth of Bowler and 3820 Northdale Boulevard. To answer that question, there are some areas that do have some brick crosswalks, and those won't align with where the proposed driveways will be, but we will repurpose those and utilize that because that'll be a way to accentuate and keep some of that historic brick within the district.
Okay. And then my last question is about the trees. You mentioned that there's 3 that you're requesting to be actually removed, and you've given justification for that. But my question then is, are there other grand trees on the site that are being preserved?
Yes. Good morning, Ricky Pederica with Dark Moss. I'm a certified arborist, a landscape architect, and certified planner. I'll try to quickly break down the trees.
Just quickly to kind of quite understand the overall.
The trees that are being proposed to be removed are, one is here, or the grand tree rather, one there. This tree that's in conflict with the 4th realignment, and then a grand tree here. So this is directly in units and partially in parking, directly in the middle of the structured parking garage, and then very close to the proposed alignment in such a way that it would impact both corners and the alignment itself. The trees proposed to remain, this was the 4th tree that has...
It's
oh, I apologize.
Yeah, if you could raise it.
This is the 4th tree that went from, after meeting on site with Natural Resources staff and discussing some of the nuances of tree preservation, we made some adjustments to preserve this tree, this grand tree. This grand tree here is in a courtyard fronting Nucio, and then this grand tree here is in an interior courtyard for the residential unit.
Very helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
And those are the only questions I have.
My turn. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, did you want to go to the mic?
Annie Barnes, Development Coordination. I just want to clarify for the record, I'll perhaps put it on the Elmo, the site plan, those cross connections, they have not been approved yet. They're proposed future connections. So let me just show this.
So these are the proposed future connections. They have not been yet approved by the city. So I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
And are you with the city?
Yes, Annie Barnes, Development Coordination. So I'll be reviewing the site plan as well.
Do you see any potential conflict with aligning these street grids?
That's really outside the scope of this application. The city would have to consent to that, and
Okay.
that they have not initiated that process yet.
Okay. Because it's a key part of the presentation.
Understood,
Yeah.
but that's a discussion that we've had with the applicant's team
Okay.
since it went to DRC a month ago. These connection points are over a dedicated city park. So that discussion, while they may have had it with the administration, there's not an application before the city yet to address that. I had recommended a month ago that the applicant and their team approach this and other issues through a development agreement, but those discussions have not yet begun with the legal department.
Okay, thank you.
While we're on the topic of those streets, if we can continue, Annie. So I saw in one graphic that those streets are labeled private, 4th Ave and 5th Avenue. That's not the intent of that in the future additional issue for this property.
Tyler Hudson, 400 North Ashley Drive. The proposed site, the site plan note that addresses this issue states that prior to the issuance of building permits, for us to use those ingress-egress points, we will have had to obtain from the city an easement over that strip of dedicated park, and that a condition of us obtaining that easement from the city is us granting an easement to the public over those drive aisles that are depicted on the site plan. And that is part of that is a text note condition that is part of the record before you all this morning and will be before City Council on December 9th.
Okay.
And is your intention to rename those streets so that they're clearly part of the historic extension?
Yes. I think the goal is to extend east, right, exactly,
Yeah.
eastward.
Okay, and while we're on the subject of the local street, one of your waiver number 7 to allow commercial traffic access to a local street, Scott Street and East Scott Drive. Can you get into a little bit more detail on that? Are there not public roads at this point in time?
So that's a great question. So local streets, there are different classifications of roadways in the city of Tampa. There are local roads, there are collector roads, and then arterial roads, and it's based on, from what I understand, it's part art, part science, but it's generally based, I think, on traffic generation. The Scott streets are neither collectors nor arterials. And so this is an example of a site that's really hemmed in, and this waiver is a necessity just by virtue of the streets we're adjacent to. I think the fact that there is that 30-foot strip of dedicated park on the western border of Nucio, that's a blocker right now to Nucio. But again, we show on our site plan that is a potential ingress-egress point, which would then alleviate the waiver, and we're absolutely committed to working with the city to get through that process, but that has not occurred yet.
So is that street becoming enlarged to handle the commercial aspect? I guess right now it's more considered a local residential type of street, with not up to current City of Tampa standards, and you want to upgrade it so it's commercially viable to access the site, be able to have trucks come down it, right?
Correct. I wouldn't necessarily say it's not up to city standards. It's a local street, and generally speaking, local streets, the intent of the code is to not flood them with commercial traffic. I would note that I think the commercial traffic here, though, is fairly limited. We're proposing just 20,000 square feet, and certainly the intent is that a lot of the commercial and retail is neighborhood serving. But again, prior to the issuance of building permits, it is imperative, and it is a goal of ours to work with the city to get that access, because we believe it promotes the street grid reconfiguration. That's best for Ybor.
Okay. And then could you pull up the site plan? We didn't, have the site plan really as part of our presentation. I'm not sure if that was a conscious effort, but I'd like to kind of hit some other points on the waivers that you've requested here. Sure. The 6-foot masonry wall, that is a city zoning code requirement. You do not want to do that. Where was that going to be located? up there,
Right
that
there,
far?
yes, sir. Yes,
So
so-
not within your site, on the perimeter of the site, not differentiating your site?
It would be along the perimeter. It would be along the shared boundary with the northern property. And again, that emanates from a code requirement that depending on the adjacencies of use, commercial to residential, commercial to commercial, you have use-to-use buffers. And one of the requirements that currently is being considered based on the interpretation of what the use-to-use is. Recall the northern site is formerly multifamily residential, but it's vacant now. That there's a requirement for a 6-foot masonry wall. We don't want to build that because we believe it would block integration to the northern parcel. And it's our preference to not have that. I mean, Graham can Stephanie can add some more reason from a design perspective why that's not favored. And I do want to note that it is in our resubmittal site plan, but we are working with city staff to determine whether or not that is actually required.
So that parcel that's not, the adjacent parcel to the north, which on the Elmo you can see is labeled White Court, that's an RM24, correct? Or is
Sorry, I
that
believe that would be YC2 because that's in the historic district.
YC2?
And we do not own that parcel, to be clear.
Okay. Thought you did. Okay. So,
Are we on your questions?
yeah,
Okay,
we can go back.
just checking.
So,
I didn't.
So-
You
Can
took
I add a
over.
little,
That's why I
Yeah,
was-
little insight to that question?
Okay.
The concern that's being discussed with Natural Resources, which is the department that requested this buffer, was that multifamily use adjacent to a multifamily use, which is what we currently are proposing, would not require this buffer.
Right.
But because the project as a whole is generally mixed use, there's potential uses that would generate the buffer that could migrate up there, and we're negotiating how strict the uses can move. So that's
Okay.
why it's in flux.
I'm sorry, I thought that property was within your control or future control, so that makes more sense now. Have him come back, because I'd like to talk about the trees. Reduce the required 50% retention of the trees to 22% on a non-wooded lot from 50 to 17. So there's two different items. Could you kind of go into a little bit more detail what those percentage reductions requested are and how they differ? Are they per each site on the north and south side, or is it two different categorizations?
So the code has a blanket requirement for, regardless of how many trees are present on a site over 1 acre, 50% shall be preserved if they're considered protected trees. We are proposing across both parcels, independent of the district boundary, that only 21% of those trees be preserved. And we discussed some of the reasons already, but I'll recap. Partially, the layout of the existing trees was generated strongly by the development pattern of the Tampa Park apartment site. So trees where you could almost see the landscape plan from the 60s today, with an oak tree in the center of some of these buildings, and it was very formulaic. And additionally, we just are proposing a much more, I guess, much less forgiving type of development with these wrap buildings and structured parking, that tree preservation becomes a very impactful exercise unless it can fall into these very strict courtyard areas or are on the periphery of the site boundary.
So what's the difference? I don't understand the difference between the 22% requested and the 17% requested. What's?
Oh, it was a math discussion on what trees would count, and we've adjusted. We've made changes on the preservation since DRC. So where we are currently, based on our latest submittal, is at 21%.
Okay, so retention is going to go from 50% to 21% on a non-wooded lot. And then we can strike the language from that, because it says from 50% to 17%. That doesn't apply.
I don't think that second clause really applies.
Okay. I was trying to figure out if there was a
Yeah,
difference
sorry.
between non-wooded, wooded, I don't, okay.
Yes.
Do we
And then
cross
whatever the difference is, you're proposing to make up for that by paying into the tree fund, as indicated by number 4.
Well, no, the difference.
Tree trust.
What will get paid in the tree trust fund will be defined by the mitigation calculations, which is not really what's being discussed here. And will very likely exceed the mitigation required. But regardless of mitigation, we still need to request relief for the retention percentage.
Okay. Okay, and off-street loading spaces, I'm not sure that's, thank you. Off-street loading spaces, can you locate those on the site plan for us?
Greg Roth for the record.
Yeah.
On the northern building, there are 2 loading spaces within the structure here. And on the southern building, there is a loading space within the structure down here.
So the northern parcel, if we say that whatever's above Fifth Avenue doesn't have a loading space? Are those buildings connected at
That's
all,
correct.
or
Yes, they are connected.
how are
And
they connected?
Functionally act as one. You'll park here and your unit will be there. So this is where all of the trash and loading is going to operate for the entire.
Is that a pedestrian bridge that I'm looking at?
That is correct.
Okay.
Going over Fifth Avenue?
Correct.
Proposed Fifth Avenue.
Proposed Fifth Avenue, thank you.
Okay, and then the southern parcel, you have a loading berth down on the south side, but that's all on one block. We're not crossing any streets there.
That is correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I only saw you point out 2 of them. Can you point out the third one?
There's
There
2.
are 2 back-to-back.
Got it. Okay, I missed that part. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, and the parking garage, looks like it is right on the street front. Is that ground floor, you're gonna see a parking garage, or is that, can we address that street edge? I know we'll get into it later with the CA and everything, but I just want to understand that a little bit more.
Yes, the 2 narrow ends of the parking garage are exposed to the street, but we have plans to, make that architecturally pleasing. Maybe even with some art on the retail street, the Fourth Avenue. But all those details will go through with you during CA.
Okay, and that parking garage is located within the local historic?
It is.
Okay. All right.
Just one question for Stephanie while she's up there too. I realize this is also part of the CA, but I just want to address it as we consider this rezoning. There seems to be opportunities there's ground floor apartments, some that face streets that aren't too busy. Are you going to be exploring perhaps to give the neighborhood, to give the project a little bit more of a connection to the street and to the neighborhood, the possibility of having entrances, individual entrances or patios that can be developed at that street level?
Absolutely. And I hurried. I rushed the last part of my presentation, but let me zoom into this. Right now, we didn't think that was appropriate along Nick Nucio, a very busy, would create a security and privacy issue. But we have along Scott Street, ground level units with entries.
Okay.
Straight. And we would love to see, we have designed this edge of the property with patios in hopes that whoever picks up this property will follow suit and put in 6th Avenue, and those would be street fronting units too. So.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. And that's no more questions from me.
Liz?
I think you answered them all. You asked them all. You asked them all. No, you.
I have one more question
tracked
because,
them.
because I'm confused. On the very top edge of what we're looking at here, you see a number of, look like parcels, or I'm not convinced, or I don't know what those are.
Apartments.
I'm sorry, where are
those-
you at?
Commissioner, are you referring to sort of the individual
Okay.
boxes?
Yes,
Those are unit footprints.
unit footprints of the building.
Right, that's the one
Okay,
that
I
looks
got
like
you.
the
Okay,
cigar factory.
Thank you.
I mean, you've kind of got, residential units up here with,
Private
exposed open courtyards, then you have a street, then you have a parking garage entry that comes in here, they line this with residential, the parking garage goes all the way to that street edge, and they have more residential over here. Some of that, I'm sure, is gonna be ground floor retail, and as you move down, it's more mixed use, so.
I see.
Probably some use of, I'd imagine it'd probably put a lot of more retail in this, or commercial in here than residential.
I think you're imagining a lot more commercial than what's being shown on the site plan. Could you point out where you're currently proposing the commercial?
Yeah, again, Greg Roth for the record. Let's see if I can get that right here. This area here along 4th
Okay.
is intended to be retail. There's a small area right here and just area right on this side. So basically fronting 4th is where the retail component will be.
So there's none whatsoever on Fifth? On
Correct.
proposed?
Proposed fifth.
Correct, yeah, this would be more of the amenities for
Residents.
residential.
Okay. And there's no pool in this complex?
There is, within the courtyards. There'd be
Oh, okay. All right.
Pool areas here and pool area there.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you want to show us on the proposed site plan?
Not on my end.
No?
Good here.
Okay, any more questions of the applicant?
So we can talk quietly. When we're talking
Almost.
quietly amongst ourselves, I'll ask you.
Any more questions? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and, the applicant has a few minutes if you want to summarize any comments, point anything else out to us.
Tyler Hudson for the record. Out of respect for your time and our fellow travelers on the agenda, I'll be very brief. I think Ron and Dennis summed it up well. The real question before you is what is reasonable? What is a reasonable land use recommendation? You can summarize law school in 3 years. That's what is reasonable. We believe that the design of this project, a ton of work has gone into this design, a lot of research about what would be appropriate here, and a lot of imagination too. And it's been a pleasure being here. We told you last time we were here that we'd come back a lot because this project has many stages to it, and I'll leave it at that. And we will continue to come back on this project and look forward to working with you in the years to come. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and close the public hearing. We can now discuss the case amongst ourselves. Ms. Welch, she had something to say.
Can somebody put that site plan back up? I don't know why they keep taking that away from us.
The paper's really nice.
And they could zoom back so you see
Yeah, if
the
you
whole
could give
site.
us the whole site.
There you go.
Thank you. Stop there. Down a little bit more.
But a little bit more. Okay.
That's the most I can do. Does that work?
Yeah. Okay. One of the questions I have for you guys is right here on Scott Street.
Mhm.
Do we have a challenge right here in that setback that Dennis was talking a little bit about? I'm looking at it being awfully tight.
Well, that looks like
Not
it's
that I'm
almost
opposed to it.
a zero lot line.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was the question I was bringing up with Dennis too, because I mean, there's a unique challenge here in that we have a non-historic street grid that the applicant is going to great lengths to try to
Bring that back.
bring it back, and yet there do seem to be some particular portions of the proposed design that don't convey the strength of what we normally see within a historic district. There's some awkward connections. I don't want to use the word lazy, but it almost appears there's some lazy interactions with the street. And I think we can address those all in design review. I'd like to see the proposed project become even more urban. My concern is that parts of it look rather suburban, quite frankly. Even
Thank
though
you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they.
In what
they've-
way?
Well.
Where are you looking?
That's really more of a design review, but just in the
Oh.
way the streets, the way the buildings edge the street, so what kind of spaces are in between and what's on the streets. The models, the typology that was presented by the architect shows very, very strong historical references to conditions that exist in the historical district, especially on the side that is within the historic district. I think we have an opportunity to strengthen those.
I think they've got a challenging site. I mean, with Scott Street, and that's kind of why I asked if they were going to improve it, make it bigger. I think it's safe to assume that there's going to be additional density over on the west side. You know, north is not there. You know, you're limited by Nuccio with the cycle track that's going on right now. So that's going to become a nice little urban, you know, edge. Did they properly address that? It's pretty dense for what they've got. I mean, be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
You know?
But an urban edge is urban, not quasi-suburban.
Yeah, I mean, given this is a little bit more suburban because the angle of the site, but this, you know, does pretty well addressing. I mean, this is going to be a nice little street corridor that you can, you know, it's going to have ins and outs, and you're going to be able to see some pockets of
Yeah, I
nature
think
in there.
it's all addressable in the next phase of the project.
I just don't want to see a parking garage when you're walking down that street right there. You know, I think
Right.
that's, you know, you need to be able to widen that and bring that back, but I know your dimensions are going to be limited to what parking garages are, so it should be faced somewhat.
And the other thing that I like that they considered was how they stepped up the buildings as they went down the space.
Mm-hmm.
You know, making sure to not, at least yet, challenge the height challenges we have. But they built that, they stair-stepped it going down the site, and I appreciated that.
Correct. So the areas that are in the district are more
Aligned.
consistent with us. They get a little bit
Exactly.
more height, but not
Yeah.
crazy. They're requesting
Right.
72 feet on the southern portion. So
Right.
when that starts becoming a little bit more CBD or urban density outside the district, I think that's fine. So I think they've addressed that boundary between
I
the
do too.
historic and the not so much in a pretty good way. It was difficult to understand the plans, and I know they're work
Yeah,
in
this-
progress of the packet
Right.
that we received of where each building was. I don't think they were keyed in.
The other
Well.
thing that I think we need to consider is, for example, I'll use the trees. Okay, the removal of the 3 trees. I understand that, but like, for example, the one being removed because the street proposal, if we do that, I would want, if the street proposal adjusts in any way, I'd like the tree to try and remain, if possible. Am I making, it's
Sure.
like,
Well,
we need to be careful about being asked to waive a tree being removed when the reason it is being removed has not been approved yet. So I think we need to
Well, that's part of their
figure that
PD YC9 request that we see before us right here.
Here.
And we also, when we're getting this waiver, we're not giving them unlimited carte blanche. We can't, we're not saying to them, you can have up to 10 trees. They've got 3 trees max.
Right.
You know, if
Right.
it turns out to be less.
And I appreciate that.
And I think they'd probably, do what they
Keep
can
them
to
there.
save it.
But do we have to say that in whatever we do? That's my
Well, I
only
think we
thing.
need to clarify these waivers as we go through. And
We need to clarify.
I know you have a question, but while we're talking about trees, I think that's the hardest thing for me to move forward with on the proposal, because, yes, the tree that they're asking for with the potential alignment of a historic thing, that's an important feature. I know Ybor City isn't known for its tree canopy. These are, again, it's more of kind of a suburban thing. I appreciate the fact that they're keeping 3, and all 3 are, for the most part, visible to the public, which I think, adds to the overall effect. But there is one, that they pointed to on the outside of the district in the lower part, where it looks to me like if you just shift the whole building closer to Nick Nuccio, they could probably save it. So, is it better to allow 3 trees, save 2, save another tree? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think they're probably doing the best they can with, they have
I do
a fine team there that knows what they're doing, and I think, You know, if there's reasons that these trees in this area, I mean, that's kind of
But
undefined.
the city has a pretty strong ordinance about removing grand oak trees. And, you know, you have to have a pretty good request as to why, besides just the typology of this building, which is, you know, you have a core of parking and you ring it with apartments. There are other ways to develop the property to get the same kind of density. They just have chosen not to explore that in order to save the trees.
Can I make a couple of comments?
We're talking quietly amongst ourselves.
Yeah, I was,
Okay.
when they showed me the rendering, although impressive, I was kind of horrified, because to me it looks like the campus of a veterans hospital. And that does not speak Ybor City. And there's a couple of reasons for that. This is, when you're talking about major buildings in Ybor City, you're talking about on a 95 by 70 foot lot. And here we're talking acres. The scale of this is wrong for me. Second, let me think where I am here. So the scale is not right. Planned developments, I asked several questions about planned developments, because planned developments are great things for developers, but not necessarily for where they're going. If you think of the planned developments, some of them, you might like them, you might hate them. In the center of Ybor City, I do believe it was a planned development for Centro Ybor. It's been nothing but a pain in the ass for a long time to people who own them, and sold them and lost money and changed the theaters to, it doesn't speak Ybor City to me, Centro Ybor. You got Walters Crossing, you got Hyde Park Village, which I happen to like, but is that Ybor City? No. Ybor City was somebody that platted streets and then lots, and sold the lots, and different developers and different owners built different buildings, and it's different, and different. Whereas this project, you got one developer, one builder, and it's all gonna come out like Levittown, only bigger. The Longshoremen's Apartments that are there now, the new development is a larger version of the same thing. I see the same parking lots, you know, there are some amenities, there's this, there's that. I can't get with this. The planned development, it's just, who knows? Who knows? But it's certainly not gonna look like Ybor City no matter what you try to do to it. I commend the extensions of 4th and 5th Avenue, brilliant. That's the reason Ybor City looks like Ybor City, because you have grids and people are constrained by the sidewalks, the alleys, and the streets. It might as well be a veterans hospital to me.
Well, just remember, we're not looking at this at the CA. We're just looking at this as a rezoning of the property with a number of waivers. You know, anything, you know, I think, you know, they've obviously been working on some design here. They have some massing. They've shown some images, which, you know, may be specific to this project or could have been taken from another project. We don't know, you know, but that's a whole separate process. I think I think there's a lot of good things that they're doing here. Okay, they've got some additional density. They're restoring some of the street grid. Nuccio, you know, I mean, that happened. There's nothing we can do about this. It curves through, but, you know, they're restoring 4th and 5th at some point in time, which I'm sure we'll have a look at. The length of those blocks is still appropriate within the district, and given the crazy shape, it looks like New Jersey or something, you know, it's kind of, they're making the best they can with it, you know, so. You know, and we're, you know, I think that's a reality of what's going to happen in Ybor too, especially in the southwestern corners. We're going to have a lot more density in that, and then, you know, there's other areas that are going to be, you know, the commercial and more residential, and East Ybor is more residential with the northern side. So
I could appreciate your comments, and that was kind of what I was trying to get at too, is not just with this project, but the way these blocks are being developed right now, there's an economic model that suits developers that we're seeing all across this city, all across other cities. There's been articles written about these 4 or 5-story buildings. Progress. Our goal here at the ARC is to, if this is what's presented to at the not the ARC, the Barrio Latino, BLC, is to make sure that these projects as presented to us somehow, first of all, of course, meet the guidelines, but also really add to the overall fabric and the overall feeling and the overall quality of what we're used to within the historic district. And that's where we can address this project moving forward. I would love to see a different kind of typology or a different kind of project or different kind of architectural response to these kind of edge conditions, which is why I asked the question of, I hope they're looking at how to create more site-specific, more historically influenced responses.
Well, let me say this. If instead of YC9, which is planned development, which suits the pocketbook wonderfully, but not so much Ybor City, if they asked for YC1, well, not only would they get parking requirements disappear, stormwater retention disappears, and it's a totally different thing. Now, you don't get 300 apartments under YC1, because, however, in Ybor City, I know I'm there every day, those buildings that have minimal or no parking, they don't have a problem filling those buildings up. The kids are running around on scooters. So there's a lot of ways to skin the cat. I just think the scale's wrong, and I think it's inappropriate. And I do commend the fact of every place that they're going, and they're trying to do their best, and the extensions of 4th and 5th Avenue, I could shine your shoes for that. I really could. It's a wonderful thing, but I think the project is wrong. So I think.
Ms. Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kate Wells for the record. Just wanted to clarify that the question before the commission is not what would the appropriate zoning be, but looking at the application and the request being made, how it complies with your guidelines with respect to a recommendation of City Council. So while I appreciate the discussion, I just want the record to be clear that part of your consideration is not whether there's another more appropriate zoning district, but the appropriateness of the one before you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm prepared to make a motion. I think the project it's a very thoughtful project. Its intent in terms of a project of this scale, straddling the historic district and just the boundaries outside of the historic district are very appropriate. And I think in terms of the waivers that they've requested, they're all reasonable, and most importantly, they're all sort of in concert with the overall goals of what we're trying to preserve and maintain and sort of create within the historic district and its boundaries. So with that said, I'll make a motion to and this is a recommendation of City Council again? Okay. Move to recommend City Council approve project BLC 21-183 for the property located /REZ 21-95 for the property located at 1015 Lily White Court for the proposed rezoning from YC2 RM24 to YC9 PD with the following conditions. Do I need to read all of the staff findings into the record, or can I just refer to them?
I would, with a recommendation, I would recommend being very specific. We're going to do a verbatim recommendation to the zoning division for city council's consideration.
Okay, then I'm going to read the following conditions. That the applicant demonstrate that the setbacks and the massing does not negatively affect the historic district. They provide massing studies that show compatibility with the design guidelines. They provide an overall site plan that attempts to reestablish the grid. Add a note to the site plan to authorize the Barrio Latino Commission the ability to adjust setbacks on all the elevations for a distance of up to 10 feet to enable the development of building elements that characterize the Ybor City Historic District and that will facilitate the architectural review process, and to provide a master plan of the project to illustrate how the current project will integrate with larger proposed development. And finally, that the applicant provide information regarding the retaining and reuse of any historic brick pavers currently within the site boundaries. Do I need to read the waivers?
But there's modifications to the waivers, so yeah, I would.
Which are the modifications?
Okay, so 8 waivers, and then there's modification from 4 to 3,
Okay.
50 to 21%.
Okay, I'll read
That's
yours.
fine.
I'll
It's
read
just
your
those-
list then.
just those two.
And since there's, and then with the following waivers, section 27-28 3.7 to reduce the required parking spaces from 993 to 940, which represents a 5% reduction. 2, section 27-284 2.5 to allow the removal of 3 non-hazardous grand trees. And section number 3, section 27-28 431 to reduce the required 50% retention to 21% on a non-wooded lot. And the rest are as read, so I'm not going to read the rest, but includes the waivers 4 through 8 as presented. Because the proposed project and rezoning would be consistent with the Chapter 27, Section 27-9, powers and duties. It represents a recommended reasonable land use change to the existing necessary to preserve the historical integrity and appearance of the locally designated landmark site, multiple property designation, historic conservation overlay district, or the historic district in accordance with the applicable design guidelines. Thank you. Long, complicated. I bet Liz is glad she didn't have to do that.
Dang straight, I will second that though.
Okay. We have a motion in front of us. All in favor of said motion to rezone the property with 8 waivers, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries with a count of 3 to 1. Okay, thank you for your
Good job.
attention on that.
Thank you for the assist.
These, okay, we'll now move on to, you want to take a quick break? Okay. We're gonna go on recess with a 5-minute break and change out, and we'll be back.
not your baby, say my baby, she's so fine. Talking about my baby, not your baby, say my baby, she's so fine. She right there to love me, people come rain or come shine. Well, I love her, don't you love her, say I love her, do you hear? I love her, don't you love her, say I love her, do you hear? She upsets my soul, whispers sweet things in my ear. I love the way she walks, I love the way she talks. She makes me feel so good, just like a good man should. She never makes me cry, that's why she's my babe, she's my babe. Nothing could be better than to see her in a sweater, in a real tight skirt that won't quit. Nothing could be better than to see her in a sweater, in a tight skirt that don't fit. She wants to have fun. People, let me tell you, that's it. Talking about my baby, not your baby, she's my baby. She's so fine. Talking about my baby, not your baby, say my baby, she's so fine. She's right there to love me, people come rain or come shine. I love the way she walks, I love the way she talks. She makes me feel so good, just like a good man should. She never makes me cry, that's why she's my babe, she's my babe. Never makes me cry, that's why she's my babe, she's my babe. Never makes me cry, and that's why she's my babe.
Please don't go. Baby, please don't go. Oh, baby, please don't go down the road. You know I love you so. Baby, please don't go. You know I love you so. You know I love you so. Before I be a dog, I get you way down here and let you walk alone. Baby, please don't go.
And move on to case BLC 21-165 for a final approval. It was previously a preliminary approval at our last hearing. Mr. Vila?
Thank you, Rich. As you stated, this is for BLC 21165 for the address of 1708 East 4th Avenue. Currently, it's a vacant parcel attached with the zoning classification of YC7. It is in front of you for a final approval for a single-family resident with site improvements. Past action, this was in front of the board and received preliminary approval on 9/28/21. I have included in your packet the motion from the preliminary approval. There were 2 outstanding items that were reflected on that preliminary approval. Moving to the photo presentation. I start with this 1929 Sanborn map, so you get a feeling of the immediate vicinity to the parcel in question.
Can we update our monitors
I apologize.
to the Sanborn? Thank you.
As I stated, this is 1929. The property in question is highlighted in the green parcel. There were 2 structures there. Currently, there's going to be 1 structure that's erected with a side yard, which is really a bonus in the historic districts. There is an alley that runs east and west to the north of the parcel. To give you a sense of place, the structure will face 4th Avenue. You have 17th Street to the west. You have 5th Avenue to the north, and you have 18th Street, which is Angel Oliva, to the east. We use the Sanborn map to show setback from property line, which is indicated here. There's usually some kind of delineation line that's respected. This is showing the overall vicinity map. Property in question is in the lower portion. Once again, 4th Avenue, Angel Oliva to the east, and 5th Avenue to the north. This is the overhead. Just wanted to call out that there is some parallel parking along the street to aid in some of the parking challenges within the urban core. It's a large parcel that he's working with. It illustrates the alley to the north. That is an open alley. He does not have to improve it. There was some discussion with transportation that the owner might touch upon as he moves forward. This is just looking from 4th Avenue. There's some trees here. This did go through natural resources, and these trees can be removed as part of the review, preliminary review process. This is looking at the side parcel that will be open. This is looking from the back of the parcel from the alley towards 4th Avenue to the south. It is abutting, this parcel does abut 2 contributing structures. This is the contributing structure to the west, and another 1-story duplex contributing structure to the east. This is the street shot. This is 4th Avenue, showing the parking in more of a grand street within the urban core. This is to the west, and turning around looking to the east, looking at some of the fabric that's associated with 4th Avenue. And directly across the street, you have a vacant parcel. Just looking at the condition of the sidewalk, you do have granite curbing here. You have the parking, granite curbing, the sidewalk, and then there's a little grade change as he gets into his property. And the condition of the alleys. As I stated, it is an open alley. For residential, single-family residential, there has been a relaxation of the transportation requirement to improve this, and I believe he's going to come in this direction here into this parcel. All the vehicular access will be done off the alley. That concludes the photo presentation, and the owner will address the board at this time.
Good morning. My name is Rick Forey. My wife and I, Dr. Charlotte Boonwood, own this lot. We intend to build our family home on this lot. Like Ron very well mentioned, this is the alley, and we intend to access it at this point. There's an electrical pole that has to be removed, and there's actually a tree that we have approval from the owner to go ahead and remove because it impedes the alleyway itself. If you might recall from last week's presentation, we will access it through the alley, and we'll park in the garage behind the property. And our architect, who unfortunately could not be here this morning, showed the board that there's ways to come in and get out of the property. We are trying to follow exactly the porch heights, where we're stepping it down in between, and that's about the size of it. This is the front of the property, and let me just see if I can. As you can see, these porch heights, we're trying to match it to be consistent. So this is the front and that is the rear. Part of the discussion and the questions from last time was the elevation of the front porch and the elevation of the house itself. And when we went back and looked at the height of the street and the height of the slab, we actually had to raise the slab up in order to be 18 inches above the crest of the road. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. But essentially, we're trying to bring in, because the whole slab on grade is coming up, we're going to be introducing this lattice work to make it look like it has an airspace underneath it, the way that they used to build it, but actually it's going to be on grade. And it will be a lattice work that extends to the front and the rear of the property to match it all the way along. This is the garage in the back with an over the garage mother-in-law suite. This is the layout of the property. Again, the reason, and this was kind of our mistake on the last time, the reason we were so low below grade is because the ground floor is designed to be ADA accessible all the way from the garage to the front. And the idea basically that my mother could live with us, who's wheelchair bound, and she'll be comfortable. And this is the roof plan, and there's really no changes to that. So the largest change from when we were here last month, again, came down to the side views, where we introduced the lattice work to basically make it look like it's off grade, and we believe that this is appropriate for the historic district. Yeah, and I apologize, I'm not as well-polished orator like the people who preceded me, but I did try.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. We'll move on with the report, and we'll come back to you with some questions in a few.
Okay.
Mr.
Commissioner,
Zilla?
should I leave this up for you guys, or?
Sure.
Commissioners, Ron Velo, staff with Historic Preservation. This application is consistent with the Ybor City Design Guidelines with the additional plans that were presented. Just going back to the previous preliminary approval, I was going through the file as he was doing his presentation. Additional documentation was presented at that public hearing showing the massing models that he's referencing, the pergola that's indicated on his site plan, the window proportions and materials that he's bringing forward, lighting and hardware was presented as well. So the outstanding item that was to be dealt today that was associated with the preliminary approval are the two that are reflected on the staff report, which is to resolve the grading issues and the elevation changes resulting in those grade changes to be affected, and show on his plans how he's going to resolve those issues. I'll be here to answer any questions.
Okay. Anyone here from the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, we're going to start asking some questions of the applicant, starting with Commissioner Welch on my right.
I remember this one. I don't have any questions. I think he's answered what we were looking for.
Just for clarification, does the porch elevation as presented match the porch elevation on the either side?
Are you referring to this porch elevation here?
No, the one facing the street.
This actually is reflective of the side of the two side supporting structures. So the height matches the two. This one's a little bit lower than the
So
one
it's
on
the
the
average.
left. So it's
Okay.
the average in between.
Okay, that's the only question.
Can I see the front steps again? I'm not sure how that's on, I guess I missed the point of how that becomes on grade.
The best way to explain that is probably to look at the floor plan. These two steps brings us up onto the porch,
Right.
again, which is in the middle between the two supporting structures. Then we enter into the home and we have this step up. We've called it the stage, but now it's only one step down to get down to the grade elevation, which is basically 18 inches above the crest of the road. And then this is actually another foot, and we'll transition probably here with a ADA accessible ramp into the property.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Oh. Do you have a question? If I could just see the site plan again, too. Could you clarify what the fencing is?
Again, that came up in the previous meeting.
Yeah.
It's basically a 6-foot picket fence.
Okay. If you could zoom in, because it looks like you have a sidewalk from the side patio to the street, or is that dotted?
The fence line really goes a little bit back behind the main structure.
Right.
And runs as such, and then up to the back, and it connects here, and this is open to the alley in the back.
Right, but it looks like there's a concrete walk. Oh, I'd say that's a dimension line.
That's a dimension line,
Oh,
yes.
okay. And the one, okay, that's a dimension line. I thought it was a concrete pad with no access. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
This is what they showed at the previous public hearing to show the inspiration for the fencing.
And it would be painted.
That's going to be stained, I think it illustrates.
It's probably a dispute between me and the architect. I'd like to have it painted.
Is stained fencing allowed in the, okay.
The fence is needed to be treated.
Treated, okay. No more
Okay.
questions.
I'd like to look at your front elevation, front and rear elevation. And I think you made some nice adjustments here. I think the window heights look like they were raised a little bit. I think last time they were a little low. The front balcony, you can zoom out, yeah. So I'm seeing two different window types here. On the front elevation, I've got 2/2s, and then the upper windows are 1/1s, no muttons.
Those are actually doors.
Those are doors.
That leads out from rooms.
Okay.
Onto the up to the
Okay.
balcony.
That's good. And your rear elevation on the first floor, left and right windows, one's a 2/2, the other one's, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's over the sink. It'll all be from the same manufacturer, and it should look a little bit more alike.
All right, I'd like to see the cross muttons in there for that one. You know, I think it's more appropriate up on the second floor to have no muttons there, just because it's a smaller window, but I think you're gonna need something. Plus you wanna be able to open those, right?
Yes.
You know, hopefully your wife's a good cook and we're not burning things, so I don't need to open windows and everything. Can you talk about your piers and lattice work? How is that gonna work? You didn't show us any drawings. I could see it in elevation, but are these piers gonna be made of brick with openings with the lattice work, as we traditionally see in Ybor, or is it gonna be stucco, or could you describe the materials?
It's going to be reflective of the historic profile, but it's going to be a hardy board. And what's behind it is actually, it's a high-performance building, it's a SIP building.
Right.
But all of the details will be historically appropriate with the wood siding, but it's most likely going to be a permanent hardy board that matches historical profiles.
Okay, and that goes down to, let's say, the finished floor elevation. What happens below that with the lattice work and is that like a stucco, scored stucco?
I believe it is.
Down at the ground floor level?
Yeah, I believe it is trim pieces that frame out the lattice work.
And what's the material of the piers, the actual columns? Is that stucco or brick?
It's
a hard, rigid material. It's going to be cementitious.
I haven't really talked. It'll likely be a stucco on top of the block for the piers.
Okay.
But we're trying to stay with the wood vernacular as much as possible.
Right.
So I'm going to have to defer to my architect on that. It'll be historically appropriate.
Okay, and I think that's something that you can work with staff. I mean, Ron knows
Yeah.
this inside and
Yeah.
out to make sure those piers are appropriate. I think that was my only question there. Rest of the palette looked good, yes.
I'm just curious about the front door, because historically, you would have had a front door that was taller and kind of matched the height of the windows
Yes.
on each side. And I understand there's reasons why that becomes complicated. You don't really have room to put a transom above it. But I think with this type of architecture vernacular you're working with, it would go a long way with just making the trim piece a little higher and detailed very simply to kind of match more proportionally with the height of the windows. And I'm wondering if you might, the board would agree and consider that. I think it would go a long way.
Absolutely.
You could even put the house numbers there or something, but it's just something that gives it more of a historically accurate proportion, especially at the street level.
I agree. Our whole goal is to make it blend in with historic Ybor as much as possible.
Good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and that same front elevation, I think we discussed last time, the columns, they're kind of regular ionic columns. A lot of times in Ybor, we see a base pediment and then a column on top of that. We asked you to look at that, but I think you're staying in the same direction here. So
Yes.
full height columns, we're not, these aren't gonna extend up like you would normally see on a stoop, but I think, I think it's detailed well and
Right.
appropriate, so.
Yeah, it's very simple but elegant.
Okay. All right, we done with our questions? You have a few minutes to summarize any comments, or?
We're looking forward to becoming part of the Ybor community, and we're really eager to move forward.
Great. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and close the public hearing. We're gonna have some discussion with the commissioners, starting with Mr. Schiller on my left.
No, I have no questions, thank you.
I wasn't part of the last discussion, but although I appreciate the interest and perhaps the need to express the faux pier system, I don't think it's almost looking superficial. I would recommend maybe just doing it along the porch that faces the street. Almost everything else is behind the fence line. And, why go to that trouble for something
Yeah,
that
well,
looks-
the previous application had it all set down another like 12
Oh,
inches, so
okay.
that hardy trim came right down to the.
Yeah.
There was a code issue that, I think we talked about, that the finished floor height needs to be 18 inches above the low point of the road there, and they weren't there. They were trying to keep everything too low, so by bringing that up, now they have to address some kind of pier treatment or pediment to.
I think addressing it along just the porch would probably be sufficient to meet the design guidelines and keep the project kind of more authentic. But that's my opinion.
Because wasn't there, never mind, I just answered my own question.
Okay. Yeah, I think what the applicant has provided in front of us is acceptable, and, I don't think it, I think you marked up a couple changes on top of the front door there, which I think is good. Clarified a couple of those windows that we talked about, and I think we're good to go there. Entertaining a motion?
Let's see. So-
Normal ones now.
Are we doing final approval with conditions?
Yeah. Do you want to do it, or?
No, all right.
Oh, okay, this is approval with conditions, and this is for, let's see, make sure I'm on the right here. Move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in BLC 21-165 for the property located at 1708 East 4th Avenue, with the following conditions: that the applicant work with staff to modify the front door as discussed at the public hearing. Because based on the findings of fact, the proposed project is consistent with the Ybor City Design Guidelines of the City of Tampa for the following reasons: its placement on the site, its massing, its scale, and its use of materials are compatible with those found within the historic structures of the district.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. Okay, we'll move on to our last case today, which is BLC 21-191.
Thank you, Rich. That's for the address of 1409 East 7th Avenue. There is a period building that's on the site currently that dates back to 1946. It is contributing. This is in the YC1 zoning classification, which is the commercial core. The request in front of you this morning is for an addition and renovations to the existing period structure. There is some past action associated with this request as well. This did receive preliminary approval on September 28th, 2021, the last public hearing we had. There were 3 bullet items associated with that preliminary approval, and that motion is attached to your staff report. Just briefly going through the photo presentation. The 1929 Sanborn map, focusing on the commercial core, which is 7th Avenue. Property does face 7th. 7th Avenue is just to the north of the front door. You have Republic de Cuba, which is 14th Street to the west. You have 15th to the east, and then you have 6th Avenue to the bottom of the site. There is an alley that runs behind this property, which is for solid waste, where they store their solid waste, and pickup is on the corner here. The Sanborn does show a structure. This was a frame structure that is no longer here, and then the structure that you see today took the footprint of this. The building here today does stop short of the property line, as did the building in 1929. This is the overhead shot. It does have a large surface parking area to the east, has some contributing structures that are 1-story in nature that are attached to the west. It is on 7th Avenue, and this is just showing that a portion of the addition, the 2-story addition, or the vertical volume will be in the rear along the alley. This is looking at the structure from 7th Avenue. This is the front facade. This is look at the eastern. This is a party wall. That part of the wall is to the adjoining lot, and then part of the wall is his wall. Just a closer shot of that common wall. Looking down 7th Avenue, this is looking down to the east. This is 7th Avenue to the west. This is just showing the surface parking lot that abuts it to the east, and some of the neighboring contributing structures to the west. Directly across the street is new construction that was approved by this board. Moving around to the rear of the site, this is the open area that's going to be added onto in a vertical fashion. This is, they have an agreement that was entered into the record last month that the owners and the city of Tampa acknowledge that this is where the solid waste pickup's going to be. And just looking at the condition of the alley, this is looking at the alley to the east, and then as it interacts with Republic de Cuba or 14th Street. That concludes the photo presentation, and the agent will address the board.
Good morning, my name is Daniel Blino, State Road 580 Safety Harbor. I'm going to start with the survey. That's the existing site. The colored portion is the existing building, so we're some distance off on that side. Our proposal calls for a demo of this wall, the existing wall, removal of the roof, as well as the removal of the back, that pinkish wall at the back. We're going to try to retain this face brick wall. A further site investigation will tell us whether that's possible or not. Okay, so this is the wall that we intend to demo as well. We're going to try to keep this wall. When it comes to the actual floor plan, We propose that we're going to fill the complete site. We're going to create a lobby in front. A change from our previous proposal is that we're going to go with a single door to correspond with the 2 columns that exist at the moment. And I also added 2 side windows to make it a lot more airy and a lot more transparent, a lot more visible from in and out. The colored portion is the building, and we created a lobby in the back. And the reason for that is we've got about a 12, 14-inch level difference between the building at that point and the street, so we need 2 or 3 steps to get down to that level. The intention is to have a roll-up door, and know that the city doesn't particularly care for roll-up doors, but it's our opinion that just to keep this portion free from crime after hours, that we're going to provide a roll-up door, a solid door, that will be hidden from sight during daytime. You won't be aware of it until after hours, in which case it will be rolled down and solid. I did cover the treatment of the proposed treatment of that little lobby in terms of a mosaic tile. Our second floor rather. This colored portion represents the second floor. We've got an elevator going up to the roof level. That is an accessible patio in front of that portion. That's the existing facade, and that facade at this point will be about 3 foot above this, so it will also act as a parapet wall. We're going to have like a baluster parapet wall on this side, and this will be accessible from the pedestrian, so for people using this. We decided to go with a roll stack away door to open all of that, so that the inside can actually communicate or flow into the outside space. As far as the roof is concerned, we propose an accessible roof structure. The idea is to take the elevator possibly to the roof level, to have a fire escape or the main stair going up, and to have a fire escape in the back also going up to that level. The rest will be storage, utility space, maybe a toilet. We'll communicate with the city whether that toilet will be required. If we don't, we won't provide it. And an AC, sort of like a separate AC portion here. So the built-up portion on the roof will be limited to that footprint. This setback is 30 foot. That's another 10 foot, so that would be 40 foot away from the street facade. When it comes to section and wall section, so wall section and building section, I'm going to start with this one. That is our proposed first floor level. That's the second floor level. That's the accessible roof. What you see here would be the roof structures on top of that. These are lines seen from above, across the road. If that's a 5 foot level, that's the road, that's the pavement on the other side of the road. The purpose of this is to show you what you can actually see. That's the parapet wall from the front facade. So that is what you'll see sticking out above that parapet wall. And if you go above that second floor parapet wall, you'll only be able to see about a foot, maybe 2 feet of that tower element on top of that. So the visibility of the setback areas are limited to that and that, which we believe, especially from the street point of view, is very limited. Then as far as the building construction and the wall is concerned, this is a section through this wall. The blue is the existing face brick that actually belongs to this neighbor. This reddish color is face brick and block that belongs to this development, and it's there at the moment. The intention is to separate the structure from that with steel columns, steel and concrete floor, lightweight metal construction on top of that. That red line is the property line, so this will be set back. You'll see the setback there, retaining all of that. So the intention is to separate the inside new construction from the existing structure. As far as elevation are concerned, this is the front elevation. I actually have it in color, which shows you a little bit better. This is a proposed color scheme. What we have in mind is to remove the existing stucco from that building. It is a very rough, highly textured stucco that we think is not in keeping with the rest of Ybor. The intention is to remove all of that, stucco it with a slightly heavier stucco than the upper structure. That's the proposed structure for this. Have it in a darker color. The structure above that for the second floor will be a smooth sand finish, which is, this is our proposal for that. These are the two color schemes. Our trim we intend to do in black. The colors are taken from sort of from the existing Facebook facade. That's an actual photograph. As I say, as far as the windows and doors are concerned, these would be wood windows and they would be painted. Then as far as the final page is concerned, this is actually where the comments that we got from the previous meeting where we addressed those. We basically had 3 comments that we were asked to look at the massing on this east facade. We were asked to look at maybe adding a window to the back facade, and we were asked about the trim around windows. So what you're looking at here as far as this facade is concerned, which is as seen from the parking lot, we had those 3 sort of dummy windows in the past, but what I propose at this moment in time is that we treat it in this fashion, where we give it a stucco surround that is proud by, let's say, 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch, and that we provide a faux grille in the face of that, so that looks like a sort of a window. So that's the proposal for these 3 or these 4 windows. And then what I also suggest is that we, right towards the back where we get to our fire escape, open fire escape, the fire escape is open up to this level, that I treat that in a similar finish to the front, that I make that a slightly darker color with that heavier texture. I drop the wall a little bit so as to break up that mass. I wrap that around, so that wall, which currently sits here, will be wrapping around here, and I drop it down further to this level. That's padded, that would be a person there. So that this is an open staircase leading up to that roof. It's treated, that corner is treated in a slightly different texture and slightly different color. In addition to that, I suggest we add a window. This window will be, the exact position of that may be altered a little bit, but for now I'm trying to keep it in line with the the back door in the back. The intent was to break down the mass of this space or this facade a little bit, as well as in that facade. And I think it did improve the development, if I may say so. I think my view is that changing the colors and the height of that parapet wall, I think, adds to the overall feeling of it. So I think that's basically it. I believe that those were the 3 comments that we got. My understanding was east facade, a window in the back, and can't remember the third one. I have it here somewhere. Considered how to break up the massing on the west facade, which I think was a typo. I think it meant the east facade. Considering adding windows, we added the window and provide a final stucco detail, which we did.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Mr. Vila.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Avila, staff with Historic Preservation. Staff's finding
that this application is consistent with the Ybor City Design Guidelines. As expressed, there were 3 conditions attached to preliminary approval. All have been addressed and are open for discussion this morning. He is correct that on the staff report, it does say west elevation, west facade, and it was the east facade that was open for discussion. So having said that, I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Anyone here from the public wish to comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to questions of the applicant. Ms. Welch, we'll start with you today.
I don't have any questions. He answered what we had from last time.
I have a question. I don't know if it's to the applicant or perhaps Doron. I wasn't at the last discussion, but it seems like you're proposing to alter the entry to the building since the last discussion. Are there historic photographs of this building? How historic is the front, Ron? Have there already been modifications made to this?
When we go back to our archives, this is the only photo that we have is consistent with the elevation that's there today.
So they're proposing to alter the front of a historic structure?
That's correct.
And that didn't come up at the last meeting?
It did come up. Part of, if I could elaborate, part of what's driving this is the density inside, that they have to meet fire egress. The door in the front has to swing out. So as it is today, it swings out over the property line, so you have to have a little alcove there to meet the fire code as well. So that recessed entryway was part of it with the introduction of the period tile to be consistent with the vernacular on 7th Avenue.
Okay, and the proposal, he mentioned 2 columns. I don't see columns. Is he referring to the proportions by the window spacings?
Maybe I can just say that if you look at this photograph, you'll see that it's got an arch here, and like an extended arch in the middle.
Oh.
There are, and I'm not 100% sure because I didn't see it myself, but it's boarded up. But we are of the opinion that there's an existing column on both of those sides, currently just hidden with board. And once we take that off, obviously those will be seen. We propose taking down this little knee wall, which is about 18 inches high, maybe even a little less, 12 inches high. Keep the columns, and then this portion will become that draft lobby. And the idea is to provide glass on the sides and just make it sufficient that people can get in and out without the door congesting the whole area.
And having the columns there doesn't interfere with your necessary egress?
Well, you know, if we were to design it from scratch, we probably would design it without the columns. But I do think, and it's a conversation we had with Ron, is that I'm of the opinion that these half arches will look extremely incorrect. They will look wrong if they're hanging in the area somewhere they need support.
No,
I think
okay.
whether they can physically or not, I think is less important. I think the image of the history requires those things to go to the ground.
But given your occupation levels of people, having those columns there doesn't interfere with the egress requirements for the...
No, I don't. You know, we haven't checked that, but I don't believe it does. I think if you look at the calculation of egress openings, it's a function of how many people occupy the building.
Okay.
And it's, I think, 36 up to a certain quantity, and then it increases by an inch. I haven't done that exercise, but I think the combined volume of that would be sufficient. Whether that door is big enough, we need to check that. That is not something.
All right. Thank you for the clarification. It's hard to see that in the photographs.
You're not reducing the exit width.
Yeah.
You know, that width is still through there, so they're probably going to be required to have other exits. You know, it's not going to be the only exit. Their occupancy is going to be higher than that, but those columns don't interfere with the exit width.
And
it creates a practical problem, but not.
And you can have a roll-up door at the back that's rolled down
Well, that's
when
going
the
to have
building
to,
is not occupied?
Yeah, I'm sure the fire marshal will stipulate that if that can't be in place when the building's occupied.
Okay.
You know, and I'll jump right into my questions.
I have a question about the upstairs. If this is still downstairs.
It's your time. I don't like interrupting people.
Sorry. The third floor, that's a functional space that's going to be open to the public?
The idea is to make it accessible to the public.
Okay,
yes.
because it looks like you've detailed it as really like the most basic of utilitarian structures. There's very little architectural idea to it.
That- No, that's not our preference, but we are sensitive to the height, and I
Right.
think we were guided we actually started off with a lot more on that.
I
lesser-
understand your constraints, but I'm just talking about how you're detailing it architecturally, because there's a precedent within the historic districts in historical structures for these kind of pop-ups on the top floor to maybe be made out of metal or look a little bit more industrial, a little bit more utilitarian, and I just don't know if that was ever brought up as a potential, because you have the hotel across the street. People are looking, as Ybor gets more dense, you're looking on these things. So I just wonder if you've thought about maybe making the third floor pop-up a little bit more architecturally interesting.
I actually went the opposite direction, trying to hide it and to sort of make it as inconspicuous as possible, rather than to contrast it. I'm not saying that was the correct decision, but that was at the time the thinking.
Okay. Those are the only questions I have.
And I think what's happening here too is, we're talking about addition on a historic building, right? So I think staff's concerns, and I think they've gone through a number of iterations with staff to say, okay, you're putting an addition on it, it can't be on 7th Avenue, you need to step it back. So they step back the first floor 30 feet, then the third floor, they step back another 10 feet. So that's why they showed us that section to see what you could see from 7th Avenue with a view line.
But I mean, if you look at the plan, it's literally like the elevator's bigger than the storage, and there's all these corners. It doesn't seem designed, and we're going to see it. So I'm just bringing it.
That was some of our concerns that we talked about at the last meeting. That's why they get the preliminary to fix a couple of these things. There's some coordination issues that you can obviously see here, but I think the intent is that yes, this pop up on the third floor is set back as much as we can, so it's not an intrusion on 7th Avenue. This lot is open, it's the blue ribbon parking right now, so that's visible. They have a building on this side, so that it's better to tuck that back away. And eventually, you figure there's going to be development on blue ribbon to bring that in a little bit too. But our concern is that side elevation, looking at that from a parking lot right now, which it's a parking lot now, but it may not be later, and just see a little bit more detailing with the stucco. And I'll go ahead and segue into my comments. I think some of the things we wanted to see is maybe some stucco control joists to kind of break that up a little bit. Are those lines, is that what those lines indicate in there?
Are you referring to the elevation? No, to the last elevation, I think, which is, the intention is that, I think you're referring to the difference between these surfaces. Ideally, I would have liked to set it back by 8 inches or bring it forward to have more than just a separation line. We probably for now will just do that with an expansion joint. It makes the construction simpler and a little bit easier. So the intention is that there's a stucco difference here, and it would be a simple sort of construction joint, but not a setting back for now. As I say, that's where that's the proposal at the moment on the table.
So do you want to, let's see, the roll-up door, I just want to make a point on that. I mean, we don't want to see that. That's got to be tucked away. I mean, if you guys want to use that, and if it could be, is it tucked inside the inside of the header?
It will be hidden in the soffit so the physical opening will be lower and the door will be above that. So if you were to pass that during daytime, you won't even be aware of it.
Okay. I just want to make sure that's hidden. That's going to be one of the conditions here. And do you want to talk about your stacker doors, how those operate on the front and the second level?
Well,
an example?
In essence, this is one of those stacked away folding stacked away doors, so that it probably would have 4 or 5 panes, and under, let's say, normal conditions, daytime conditions, only one of those doors would actually open, and for the rest of the time, and we may actually make one one of the doors slightly different for that purpose. But the intention is to be able to slide all of that back so that we have that full 20-foot as a possibility.
They're wood with glass
Wood with
panels?
glass.
They're not
Yeah,
solid
wood-
doors, they're
Yeah,
windows?
wood glass, wood with glass, storefront treatment.
Do you have a section through that construction section?
Yeah, I'm looking at this door. Let me show it like that. I'm looking at that door. So it's basically, I think it's going to be a 10-foot door. If I may be wrong, it may be an 8-foot door. I think my height is limited. I've got 11-foot toe, so maybe an 8-foot door. And that is just a large, if you look at the elevation.
Well, it's just that for final, it's a rather large opening. I realize you don't see it from the street, but we as a board want to ensure the quality and the consistency of the kind of detailing that we see throughout the district. On the floor plan, that shows as a very thin wall. Nothing gives me the confidence that that large opening is in scale or has the right kind of shadows or recesses that we usually look for in the district.
What I have here at the moment, that's what you're looking at. So this would, now as I say, we started off with that just being a door with two side lights. We had a conversation and we thought that we could make that all a stack away door. We don't have a strong opinion on that. We are good with either. And essentially that would be on a, not the same plane, but that would be set back by a couple of inches. Typically a door would be in the middle of an 8-inch wall. So that's what you're looking at. And it's, as I say, for the most part, would be not visible unless you're in the building across the street. But even so, we intend to treat it in the same quality and the same colors and everything else. So we didn't think.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question for Ron on that front elevation. With those arches that are out there, are those, I think there's a couple funky things going on with this building. The curvature at the top of the parapet and those arches. I know that was the only historic, we don't really have any historic photos. Do you think those were added on, or do you, I guess they're two separate issues. The parapet, I guess it is what it is, right? But the arches over the main entry, do you think that was added on, or is that something that, once they get out there in construction, they're gonna see, maybe they're framed in or something like that with stucco and could be removed? How is that gonna work?
It appears to meeting on site as well as looking through our archives. As I stated, this was the only picture that we have that's similar to what's illustrated on the screen today. It appears that the front facade has been modified. The openings on each side to the east and the west are not original. The door that is integrated into the front facade is not original either. The arches that encompass the center bay appear to be modified as well. The stucco patterns and the scarring and ghosting that's left behind as evident of some work that's been done in the past. The visor is not original. The members themselves are very contemporary in nature. They're not original blocky style brackets. They're just open brackets. As part of this request, he's changed the visor to something that's more period appropriate, or more horizontal with tiebacks. So the whole facade, you see just above the pent roof that's there now, you see some scarring lines that are there as well.
We don't see your picture.
Oh, I apologize.
We've got the Elmo up on screen.
So the canopy and the brackets have been determined not to be historic.
Yeah, this is going away.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the brackets, you see how they're hollow now. They're not heavy timber members. The underbelly here is just plywood. You see some warping of the roof itself. You see some scarring up top over here. There's, conduit that's left behind, and then just patches of stucco throughout the whole front facade. You see some arch details over the door that's not expressed in the door that's just punched in there now. So many modifications over time.
Yeah. But I think it's safe to say, Ron, too, historically, what would have been here would have been a kind of a richer expression of openings and doors and had depths and,
it would have had a more.
There would have been a variety of planes expressed between the glass and the mullions and the doors, and none of which I'm seeing in the proposed design.
I do agree with that statement. If you look at the facade here, there is a recess and some shadowing of, what's here now. So there is that expression of detail. This archway here and the archway here, if it just dies and it doesn't have the columns to ground it, will look very foreign. That's why the introduction of the columns.
Yeah. When does the building date to?
46.
46.
I'm wondering if like this bay is the same as this bay, which is more traditional with this bay. Like usually they have column spacings or a column over here, and then that right bay that we're looking at there with the posters all open.
Yeah,
There's
they
no
can't see
pediment.
what we're referring
They
to.
probably infilled here too.
Right.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like the client's going to head with a total historic restoration. They're doing some elements that'll kind of clean it up. So that's what they're proposing. And I guess what we're looking at for what they're proposing is, it's not a it's not a restoration. It's more of a proposed renovation. So bear that in mind.
But have we seen storefront details?
On their sheets. They're doing windows.
This is,
We need the Elmo, please.
That's not a construction drawing. We need for final, we need to see construction drawings, a section through the proposed renovations.
which, right, now I was, maybe I misunderstood. I thought we would, as far as the wall section is concerned, that's his construction drawing. As far as the material selection is concerned, I thought we would.
Could you put up your front elevation?
We require a section through a typical opening, a typical door, a construction detail. It
Right.
shows us the placement of the window, the sill, the treatment of the headers.
Did we get that last time, Ron?
The only items that were expressed to come to final approval were the three that are on your staff report, were the final stucco details, the consideration of adding windows on the alley elevation, and then to break up the massing on the east facade. So everything else was presented, or you were comfortable with the direction it was going.
Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Schiller?
No, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. We're gonna go ahead, you have a few minutes to summarize any comments?
No, besides the fact that I think the comments from the last time did improve the two facades that we looked at. I've always felt a little bit uneasy about the south facade with being very bland, and I think the reduction of the far sort of south portion of that east wall also helps the development. So I think the comments were very productive.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and close the public hearing. We can discuss the case among ourselves. I'll start with Mr. Schiller.
No, thank you.
I don't feel that this project has presented enough information for a final. It's a tricky renovation. I know it's not a restoration, but I don't see a consistency of vocabulary, a consistency of attitude, and without the appropriate drawings to really try to understand. If they're taking a minimalist approach, then it's, what we need to review are the real details. And I don't see any of that presented. So I think it's still at the preliminary stage.
Yes.
Just checking. I hear what you're saying. In regards to what we asked them to come back with, I think he satisfied what we asked him to come back with. In regards to Ron's point, it went through last time, and with everything that he presented last time, which I don't think it was all inclusive today, because that's not what we asked for, right? We just asked for these three things. And he satisfied the three things that we came back, that we asked him to come back and do. In the presentation that he did last month, or last time he was here, that brought him to this point, I think it was much more clear, and we had many more information about some of the things that you're questioning, and some other things as well. So I think in relation to what we asked him to bring back today, I think he's met that.
Go ahead. I just feel that it's an important structure on 7th Avenue, it has an important placement, that is historic, and I don't think that the suggested or the proposed alterations, just keep in mind to the street side, doesn't show a certain sophistication or direction in terms of the style of 1946 architecture. It just doesn't seem terribly thought out to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is what we struggled with last month too. I mean, I think the entire submittal was kind of lacking a lot of information that we really needed to make an informed decision on that. And these kind of three things are what we wanted some more information on, but really just need to be clarified a good deal. The front elevation still bothers me, that street facade. I know what they're proposing to do is, do stucco and some windows, but it's 7th Avenue. I think 7th Avenue is held to a higher standard.
Well, even the proportions of the windows don't seem to be coming from a historical
They're ones.
information.
There's no framing within the windows. There's no detailing. I'd almost prefer them to take a look at what's there a little bit, try to work within the historic framework before we start adding more stucco and applied treatments and everything else. I think they've been respectful of the front setback from 7th Avenue with the second floor and third floor additions. They're being respectful on the east side by pulling that new wall off of the existing masonry. But I think the front facade still kind of bothers me.
Yeah, and even the position of the canopy, when you look at the one character defining feature of the street level facade would be the arches. And I applaud them for trying to, emphasize those. But then the canopy where it's currently positioned seems to kind of be in conflict with trying to celebrate that, the proportions.
That's going away.
No, the proposed canopy isn't high enough.
Right.
I think it actually almost violates the appreciation of the arts. And it's just, I have nothing against a stripped down, historicized building, but it just seems like when you do that, it has to be a really kind of knowing study and a real clear attitude about how you do that. And I don't see that.
Well, we can entertain a motion. I'd like, Ms. Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kate Wells for the record. As you work through these details, I just want to remind the commission that preliminary approval was granted last month, and that has to mean something. And unless the applicant has changed that which was granted preliminary approval, the commission really doesn't have the ability to go back and revisit what was granted last month. And the focus today should be, as difficult as it is, should be on those items that were identified by the commission as requiring further attention and detail at today's meeting. So, I can't speak to whether there have been any changes to the front facade since preliminary approval was granted. Staff can help with that. But unless there have been changes, I caution the commission on revisiting that which received preliminary approval.
Thank you.
And honestly, I guess I don't really recall what was granted in preliminary approval, except I guess aside for the three conditions that we've outlined here. So I thought there was more items. So,
but Just for clarification too, because I don't have the benefit of having been part of the preliminary review process. For a final, isn't it still valid to ask for all the required drawings, such as construction sections?
I'll defer to staff on what they require as part of the application for final.
I think as the board moves forward today, you could look at the preliminary approval was granted with the extending items that are still associated with your staff report. These are for verbatim is what we brought to you. So this was the motion, and I had a copy of the preliminary approval attached. If additional discretion is to be looked at, if it's the pleasure of the board to delegate to staff as they work from their design drawings to their construction drawings, those architectural elements can be incorporated in their construction drawings as we sign off on those and as they interact with the permitting department.
Okay. We can entertain a motion.
All right, I'm gonna try this.
Point of order, just a question for legal. Is it appropriate to issue another preliminary approval to keep them moving forward? Or does that only happen once and then you either need to continue or vote it up or down? Just wondering.
Good question. What I'm unable to address is what would this commission be looking at in the way of a second preliminary approval, and what would be required for final approval, and is what the commission would require for final approval already addressed in the prior preliminary approval. And that's always the challenge with granting a preliminary approval on a project.
Okay.
Oh, I'm making
You
a
wanna make a
motion.
motion?
I'm sorry. I'm thinking
I
about
just
what
had a
you
point of
said.
order and
You're fine. Okay, which one? Certificate of appropriateness. Okay. Based on what was presented today, I would move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the I'm looking for final approval, right? Certificate of appropriateness. Am I
Yeah,
right?
it's either
Okay,
this
that's
one
where I'm
or
at.
with conditions.
yeah, with conditions.
And I don't know
Lots of
that,
conditions.
I don't know that I want, based on what we asked them to come back and present, I believe that's what they did. So that's the motion that I'm gonna make.
With no
If there were other conditions that we should have addressed last month, then we should have done that.
And I think that's Ms. Wells' point.
And
Right.
so I'm going to make,
But I think
But-
you're within, if you could stipulate conditions, I think what Mr. Shalatz is looking at is
Like-
submission requirements not being
Right,
met.
and I don't
But
know-
There's also things that we can delegate staff with a lot of details that they can manage throughout construction, like, if they start getting into this demolition and those existing conditions are not what they've had, then that front elevation needs to change.
and it needs to come back.
But
Or
They
they
can
can
come
have-
back,
or
or
they-
they can work with the applicant.
I hear what you're saying.
well, for instance, one of the requirements for submittal is an architectural wall section through a window at 1/4 = 1 inch or larger.
So my
Was that
question,
presented at the last hearing? So if,
I don't recall.
yeah, so you can,
off the top of my head, I don't recall.
okay, well,
but
you
I
can make
have
that
to
part of
ass-
condition so that the kind of concerns that have been raised are at least presented in a drawing form and staff can.
And I hear what you're saying, but there's a part of me that says if those are the requirement stipulations, then wouldn't staff have been through that before they got to us the first time? So it had to be, and I'm sorry, I
Yeah, no,
can't
it's-
go back to that specific point because last month's meeting was rather long and rather intense.
Yeah.
And so I can't go back to this specific item, but I'm thinking if that's part of the stipulation requirements, that was staff's job to check that off before it even came to us the first time. So why am I gonna make that a condition for this? What they did was they met the requirements last time for staff to allow them to come, and staff indicated they met the requirements. So all we did was identify 3 other things we wanted addressed for pre-approval. That's what they came back with today. I hear you, so I don't know if it's a process thing that we need to change, but I'm thinking, going back to a preliminary and all that business, it's like, no, staff should have checked that before they came to us the first time, so we have to trust that staff did their job and did that. So if it presented to us and staff said it met requirements, then okay, they checked it, they checked that box, and it's in front of us.
Okay, except that from my understanding, there have been some changes since the last presentation. They're now recessing the door, so they've changed the storefront condition.
And again, that would have been staff's responsibility to address that before it came to us. If something changed from what we preliminarily approved last month, then staff would have checked that and it would have been identified when it came to us today. Today, all that's coming are the 3 things. And I hear what you're saying, but I'm like, okay, wait a minute. This isn't making sense in my mind, because at some point in time.
Well, I think, like for instance, on the second floor, they are requesting to change what had been presented prior as a fixed door. Now they're proposing in this part. A folding door. So I think it's okay for us, it's a chain section, so it's okay for us to require additional drawings to give us the
With that information.
So they've changed the storefront, and they've changed the folding window upstairs. So I think it's okay to request detailed drawings per the submission
I'll
request.
let you make the motion.
Well,
I hear you. I hear what you're saying, and I think I hear you, and I get what you're saying, but then I think we need to fix something before it gets here.
In order to solve the problem, what they want to avoid is coming back. So if you make it, and Ron made a good suggestion, if you make a condition to deal with these things to the staff, they don't have to come back here. They get what they want. We fulfill the promise that we quasi made to them last time. And that seems to be,
I agree, but I can't, I will not be making a motion on it.
You have a vote on the motion.
Yeah.
So you can voice your vote either way.
I can't support the project as it is right now.
I think the drawings are lacking. I mean, I think, obviously we should have seen more. Last time they submitted was a 3-sheeter, bigger sheets with multiple floor plans, which, there's been some modifications to that. I mean, one had a site plan, a couple floor plans, they had the section through, but there was no sections through the storefront. And I think they're gonna, once they get out there in construction, they're gonna see some other things that they weren't planning on. And that's where I'd like to delegate that to staff to work with this applicant in the field to fix those field conditions as historically sensitive as possible. But, we're within our right to add conditions to this for a final approval, which I think, the glass needs to be detailed better. And that's what they're proposing to do.
Yeah, and again, I
And
can't.
if we need additional drawings, then I think you're within your right, or we could move this forward and take a vote. And I'm just gonna make a point to the audience here that, I don't know which way the vote's gonna go, but the applicant certainly has a right to request a continuance before a vote is taken.
Yeah.
And that's within their right, they can request that before we do work on this, and maybe in the meantime, they'd want to,
I would just
change
like
a few things.
Yeah, I'd just like to express that, the project as was presented today doesn't reflect the level of detailing that we continually request from applicants before the board, to understand the, how a project and how its construction meets the guidelines within a district.
Yep.
We're back at me again, aren't we?
Well, I don't know.
Well, we don't know if the applicant wanted to do a continuance based on this conversation. Do we?
Well, we'd have to reopen the public case if that's, you know, if you express a certain intent to communicate right now, you can.
I don't know, I'll just, everything will be communicated.
Well, okay, can we have a motion to reopen?
Make a motion, we reopen the public comment,
Seconded.
Public hearing.
public hearing, sorry.
Okay, so moved. And I think the point was, if you need another month and want to explore these items before, you have a right to request a continuance before we actually make a motion and take a vote, because at that point, then it is what it is.
But I think one thing I would like to show is that as far as, this is the elevation, front elevation we presented last month. And this is the elevation, front elevation I presented today.
They had a double door.
So that's last month. And this month. And you'll see that, I'm not sure whether you can see, but you'll see that the only change was that we changed that double door to a single to fit in better between the two columns. And we showed the door to be a little bit heavier in terms of the panels. This one is clearly just a single door with side windows. And this one could be either, stack-away panels or a double door with side panels. Either, aesthetically, it's the same. So, as I said, that's last month. This is this month, and we were asked to add we were asked to add to indicate the stucco finishes, which is what we did. But for the rest, there were no changes from last month.
There appear to be changes between the windows you're proposing. The frames have gotten much thicker.
Well, I think if you look at what I showed last time, yeah, you're correct. But if you look at what I showed last month, if you look at wood frame windows, realistically they are a little heavier. So I think I brought it more in line with the actual detail of a wood window versus.
Are they operable?
No, they're solid.
Do they have a sill?
Basically just a stucco sill. Yeah.
When you look at historic buildings of this nature, which is sort of a late, Mediterranean revival or mission style, they often do have sills expressed. Did you consider?
Well, we took our lead from the existing, what we found there, and maybe that was, maybe we, and we're not unwilling to, but as I say, we took our lead from what we found in the building. They don't have any sills at the moment, so we didn't think it would be appropriate to add it if they didn't have it at the time. That was just the philosophy. Our request would be to work with staff to resolve it. Simply in view of time, the client is quite eager to proceed. In today's market, building anything is hard. The cities are, getting permits is slow, getting material is hard. So it becomes just a challenge. So I think we're not unwilling to make changes and to make some modifications.
I appreciate that, yeah.
And work with staff, but my client is quite desirous, on needles and pins to be able to proceed with the project. I think that's the bottom line.
if I may say a word. Alex Mesropian, I'm the owner of the building. Just want to say 1497th Avenue. My wife and I, Tina Marie Loyan, we've been part of Ybor community for 20 years, been involved with real estate and management. My company does the maintenance in Ybor City, and Tina does all the real estate, and you know Tina, my wife, pretty good. So our plan is, we've been working on this building for 4 years now, been trying to change the plan, trying to hear professional people. I have no idea anything to do with this place, but people like him. I changed 3 people already, and they're trying to advise me and guide me. And we've been working with Ron Villa for a few years now. And he said, this is it, stuck with one deal and proceed with that. So we're not trying to avoid anything. So of course, we want to try to stay with as much, we're staying with Ybor concept and everything, preserving the brick, quality and everything like that. And I know you weren't present in the last meeting, and I understand your concerns, but believe me, we're trying to preserve everything, and my theme is all about Ybor City. In fact, it calls Bolita Club. Nothing to do with gambling, but I want to bring the whole history of Ybor City, and that's why it's going to be more historic side of Ybor City with the whole design interior. So believe me, everything has to do with Ybor City. I'm going to present everything. So I know you want to see the details. I want to see the details as well on everything. But if it's possible to work with the staff, Ronville or somebody else, and we're going to, within the next few months, we'll work on all the details on the doors, windows, locks, everything. I want to do antique stuff. That's my thing. I like to do wood, metal, antique. That's my thing. So, yes, I know you want to see the details. I want to see the details, but my thing right now, it's been 4 years. I want to move forward. It's going to be another 6 months for me till I get all my permitting, my blueprints, my things. So that's where I'm from. I just want to put a few words so you know where I'm coming from. I'm not just trying to build this thing and get it. It's a long-term thing. We own the building. It's not just a 5 year and we're out of here. It's going to be for the next 100 years. It's a family business.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you for your comments. They were very helpful, and we understand your intent. We're going to go ahead and close the public hearing now. Any other discussion, or are we ready for a motion?
Do the motion with your conditions.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to do a final motion with the following conditions. Move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing and BLC 21-191 for the property located at 1409 East 7th Avenue with the following conditions. That the applicant present to staff final construction wall sections through the proposed revisions to the storefront and to the second floor folding windows / doors. That the applicant provide detailed drawings of all scoring, stucco scoring on all exposed elevations of the project. That the applicant work with staff to revisit the height of the proposed new canopy so that it's in proportional relationship with the existing historical openings. And I believe those are my 3 concerns. If there's anything to add?
Yeah, I think your concerns on the front elevation is making sure the windows are installed in a historically sensitive manner so that, if they're doing stucco, there's some stucco detailing that needs to be included.
Right, the wall sections as presented to staff will ensure that their placement within the wall and the shadows that are created and the materials and the detailing are consistent with the design guidelines in Ybor City. Because then the project would be consistent with the the Ybor City design guidelines in regards to adaptive reuse and an addition to an historic structure based on its massing, sight lines, and materials detailing.
Second.
Second. Okay. All in favor of said motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And seeing no other business,
We do have a
staff.
couple other items in our minutes, like we were gonna do a guideline review or a guideline update.
I don't have an update on that.
We asked for staff to provide an update on the next public hearing, on the Ybor City Design Guidelines.
Yeah, and I think Dennis isn't, had to run early. Kamaria isn't here, so I think those things are in process.
So move them, if we need to make a motion to move them to the next meeting, or?
I think we do, because it's in our minutes that we asked for it, so it should have been an agenda item, and I don't recall.
Yeah, let's, why don't we make a motion to continue those items outlined in the September 28th meeting to next month.
I make a motion that we continue the items identified, the item of design review, wait a minute, design guideline review,
Noise ordinance,
was the noise ordinance?
yeah,
Where's the
item number
noise
3.
ordinance?
Outdoor rooftop bars, noise ordinance, item number 3.
Yeah. Item number 2 and item number 3 under new business. In our September 28th minutes, I move that they be moved to our November meeting and be put on the agenda. Do we have, so so I made that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Sorry, Rich.
You doing? All in favor of said motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so I got a question.
Okay. Motion carries.
So I have a
Yes.
question. So when we have big stuff coming like that, like we had again today, last month's meeting went till almost 2 o'clock. This month's meeting's close to noon, little after. How do we handle the other things that we have coming up, like our items number 2 and 3 on the agenda? Do you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
we go through the projects and then we wanna hurry up and get out of here. Well, okay, wait a minute, I don't wanna be crabby, but some of these projects are raising these issues that I
Yep.
think we need to chat about and understand and get clear guidance on.
Well, I guess one option would be to ask that they be put at the front of the agenda, and we notify the applicants that, there's board business, and that we might be able to
That's
hear a
a
little
good
bit later.
idea. What
I
about,
mean, we have staff reports at the beginning, so they, a lot of times that's where they're done. And, I think the design guidelines is an ongoing process, so if there's nothing to report, and I think staff is always trying to be respectful of our time, knowing that this meeting was probably gonna be a nooner, 3 hours, it's probably, full agenda. So I think if it comes up on a lighter meeting, maybe next month with the holidays, it's lighter, I don't know.
what
who
the
knows?
heck, Rich? Some of that's valid, some of that I'll buy, some of that's valid, but I think part of the
Some of
deal
that you'll
is,
buy.
that's
Right.
what it's our job. Don't be whining at me, it's our job.
I'm with you.
I know.
I think staff does an excellent job of trying to manage that. I think
I
Dennis
do
had a
too.
prior commitment, Kate's filling in today, so,
Well,
it's
and I
not,
think
it's
we
not,
also-
not our normal cast of characters.
I think we also have to remember that, they're starting to come through with that bigger project, and we're probably gonna see them every month. And today they were allocated an hour and took 2. So.
Well, they get an hour for their presentation, cause they had 2 separate motions, and then,
Okay.
that's why I tried to
Okay.
move them
but
along. I wanted to get to
they're
the
a
site
long
plan.
they're a long discussion project every time, and
And
they
it's gonna
will
be that way, yeah.
So do we let the single-family residents go first? Let them come through and get out of here? Because,
Maybe.
can we
They
adjust
have
it?
out-of-town people that were here, and so I think that was why that was ordered that way,
And
so.
Liz, your concerns, I feel, are very valid, and you're always welcome, or all of us are always welcome to call Dennis.
Oh, I do.
With scheduling issues like that, just, to make suggestions. I agree, we don't want to keep kicking the can down the road in terms of items that are important for us to discuss
Yeah.
publicly.
And we're going to, and the bigger project that's coming through, the bigger development, we're gonna see it, I'm pretty confident, every month.
All right, Ron, could we try to get those items addressed next month? at least a brief?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we adjourned?
Are we adjourned? We're adjourned. Thank you.
All
Thank you
right.
all for your time today.
Thanks, guys.
Good discussion.